3434341 or upload it on your own social media handle with the hashtag NationFirst. We'll take some of your videos on air and the sharpest responses will get limited edition Republic merchandise from us with a surprise.
Nation First means celebrating everything that defines us as Indians. Nation First at Republic is about taking pride in every victory of India and coming together in every moment of strife so we pull through as one. And Nation First is raising the pitch on the campaigns on behalf of the people. Nation First is exposing injustice no matter the cost. And what does Nation First mean to you? Send us your thoughts on video via WhatsApp on the number 73044-34381. I'll repeat that, it's 73044-34381, or you can even upload it on your social media handle with the hashtag NationFirst. And we'll take some of those videos on air on Republic TV, and the sharpest responses from you, the viewer, will get limited edition Republic merchandise from us with a surprise.
Nation First at Republic is simply about putting India first. It is about putting Indians first. It is about putting Indian interests first. It is also about putting Indian forces first. It is about putting the tricolor first. What does Nation First mean to you? Send us your thoughts on video via WhatsApp on 73044-34381 or upload it on your social media handle with the hashtag Nation First. We'll take some of your videos on air and the sharpest responses will get limited edition Republic merchandise from us with a surprise.
Half-truths and half-baked facts have been the defining nature of the digital news media ecosystem in India. Agenda-driven cabal
From the Mumbai studios of Republic TV, it's time for Arnab Goswami on the debate.
Arnab Goswami on the debate at 9. Presented by Amity University. Powered by RP Sanjeev Goenka Group, NECC, Century Ply and Epson Eco Tank Printers in partnership with Mind Super App and beyond.
Good evening and welcome, viewers. We've been bringing you live coverage from the White House and the scale and the splendor of the welcome of Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the White House. We brought you these pictures and the warmth, the stage, the setting, as well as the timing of this visit. It all makes Prime Minister Modi's state visit to the United States of America without doubt one of the most important and very historic foreign policy moments globally this year. Viewers of Republic, this is not another bilateral, it is much more. It signifies a major transformative shift that will change India's global power play in a geostrategic sense for the long term. As Prime Minister Modi and US President Joe Biden meet as we speak at the White House, I'd like to begin with a few points to emphasize. With this visit, India joins the great powers of the US, Russia, China, and now India. 2, our economic size, the depth and the scale of our market, all because of the unprecedented modernization, the massive infrastructure investment, the determined steps taken towards building our digital economy. And remember, there's no punt that foreign powers take. It is no punt, it is the expected future growth of India that has made us a global economic power that the United States cannot ignore, the world cannot ignore. Thirdly, we now emerge as the largest neutral country in this planet. Let me repeat, the largest truly neutral country in this planet. Not in this block or that, but in a block of our own, with a unique foreign policy that operates only and only and only, as we have seen post-Ukraine, in national interest. At the Republic Summit earlier this year, I had said this very point in the Prime Minister's presence. And I had said that Pradhan Mantri ji, future generations will remember, and this will be written about in history, the absolute unconventional but direct foreign policy interventions that have emerged from the Prime Minister. And now I can say this again, that the transformations that we are seeing today, the stature that the country is receiving, are a direct consequence of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's unconventional approach to foreign policy. It's brought about a very, very direct positive influence in the way we are perceived and respected globally. And it is that and the power and stature of 140 billion Indians together that is being recognized globally today. In the course of this broadcast, which will continue till well into the night, past midnight, I would like to begin by requesting all the viewers of Republic that, dear viewers, a moment like this comes once in many decades. And after midnight tonight, we have a packed calendar for the Prime Minister. And I would really request you to follow the developments on Republic. Right at the start, I want to say to you tonight that as of now, the Prime Minister and US President Biden are now having their one-to-one meetings between themselves and their delegations. After midnight and somewhere till 2:30 a.m. today, Republic will bring you live coverage, uninterrupted coverage, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses the United States Congress and then attends the congressional luncheon thereafter. Ladies and gentlemen, the coverage goes well into the early hours of the morning as US President Joe Biden and his First Lady Jill Biden welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi on their arrival for the state dinner. And all of this continues, ladies and gentlemen, well until about 6 o'clock India time. And I know it will be late, but I know that many of you will be watching. And I want to thank you in anticipation of that. We have two debates this evening. Debate number one tonight. What this means, what this bilateral means. That's right after this. At 9:20, I'll be joined by former US National Security Advisor John Bolton. Ladies and gentlemen, on this very special edition of the debate, at 10 o'clock this evening, this breakthrough diplomacy and the business deals that are being closed in this very significant visit. And the coverage will continue right after that and beyond that till Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses the US Congress. So here are the headlines, ladies and gentlemen, this Thursday evening on The Debate Tonight.
Prime Minister Modi, welcome back to the White House.
White House rolls the red carpet for Prime Minister Narendra Modi with a very grand ceremonial reception.
पोस्ट कोविड काल में वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर एक नया रूप ले रहा है। इस कालखंड में भारत और अमेरिका की मित्रता पूरे विश्व के सामर्थ्य को बढ़ाने में पूरक होगी।
From the launch of the White House, Prime Minister Narendra Modi sets the framework for India-US relations. For the first time, the White House opens its gates to such a large number of the Indian-American community. Thousands are there as the Prime Minister is received.
To become India's best friend, ये आपके शब्द आज भी गूंज रहे हैं.
One-on-one meeting followed by delegation-level talks. The world watches as India-US relations soar. Fighter jet engines, armed drones, and the joint space mission, India and America are sealing big-ticket deals. And in a few hours from now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be addressing the US Congress for the second time in 7 years. Ladies and gentlemen, what we witnessed a few minutes back at the White House is unprecedented. Never before was a global leader received at the White House with such enthusiasm, with such large crowds watching, and it is set to get bigger as the evening goes on. As we speak, very, very big deals are being discussed and signed, deliberated, final touches are being given on, and it's happening at the Oval Office. The address at the United States Congress is expected next, and the very much awaited gala dinner is coming up. We have live coverage throughout Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US, as I have said, is a very defining moment for our diplomacy.
Modi, 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 Modi,
It is a pivotal bilateral in a changing world order.
Stories that define the relationship and the limitless possibilities between the United States and India. Two great nations, two great friends, two great powers that can define the course of the 21st century.
The strategic significance of the meeting cannot be underplayed.
पोस्ट कोविड काल में वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर एक नया रूप ले रहा है। इस कालखंड में भारत और अमेरिका की मित्रता पूरे विश्व के सामर्थ्य को बढ़ाने में पूरक होगी।
The focus is on economic growth.
Had an excellent meeting with Prime Minister Modi. Very impressed with the vision that he has for India and the advances that India is making. We discussed a wide range of topics, and we really look forward to greater opportunities in India.
At the heart of the meeting is balancing of China.
With your partnership, we've invigorated and elevated the Quad between the United States, India, Australia, and Japan to advance our vision of a free, open, secure, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Decades from now, people will look back and say, Quad bent the arc of history toward global good, as the Prime Minister describes it.
It's a bilateral fueled by tapping into the power of an Indian diaspora.
प्रधानमंत्री बनने के बाद तो मैं स्वयं तो कई बार यहां पर आया,
लेकिन इतनी बड़ी संख्या में इंडियन अमेरिकन समुदाय के लिए व्हाइट हाउस के द्वार आज पहली बार खोले गए हैं।
The delegation level talks underway right now are defining. And the big highlight of the meeting are the numerous deals aimed at taking the relationship to the next level. The deal for production of fighter jet engines, purchase of armed drones, a semiconductor investment, easing of visa norms, and a partnership transcending to space. This visit is clearly an inflection point in India-US relations. Let's debate.
I'd like to welcome Mukesh Agni, President and CEO of the India-US Strategic Partnership Forum, who's joining us from Washington. Stephen Golub, International Affairs expert from Washington. James Dorsey, very respected and senior strategic expert, is also joining us tonight, as is Major Gaurav Arya, Republic's consulting editor, Strategic Affairs. Smita Prakash, editor-in-chief of ANI, giving great live coverage from US. Brahma Chelani, author and professor at the Center for Policy Research. And I have, of course, with us this evening Saurabh, who is the editor-in-chief of newsmobile.in. Saurabh is at Washington, has been there at the White House. I'd like to get a sense of the color from him first. Saurabh, you were there. I think it was incredible to see the White House open its doors, as the Prime Minister said, to some 6,000 or 7,000 Indians who were there. Give us a sense of the spectacle there.
Unprecedented.
Yes.
Arnab, you see these flags there? I want to put it in front of you. These are the flags all over. The Indian and the US flags. It was like a electric atmosphere. I've covered many state visits, many bilateral visits over my career. You've covered many of them with me. But I can tell you, this was the electric atmosphere. Today, every Indian, and Prime Minister said it, 1.4 billion Indians felt so proud of the honor that US President Joe Biden and US gave to the people of India. It's a celebration of the friendship, the partnership. And I can tell you, I was there right on the side. I had a vantage view. The chemistry between the two leaders, and chemistry plays a key role in diplomacy. In fact, that's the reason why you've seen the kind of welcome Prime Minister's got, because the two leaders have developed a chemistry and they are committed to make sure that this relationship not only flourishes, but also defies what the naysayers have been saying, because this is the relationship for the future. And you'll see, and I can give you some exclusive details of the joint statement they're going to issue, which has just been told to me by sources. In fact, they will be announcing some more diplomatic outposts. India is going to set up a Vivekananda chair at University of Chicago. WTO, where they had some major disputes pending, they have also reached a deal where they will settle those disputes. You will see major progress on cyber security, on space, AI, quantum computing will be the areas of cooperation. But I can tell you the mood here. I was talking to people who have come from all corners of the US. Now, they felt that their status has been elevated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi's engagement in diplomacy with the US and his relationship with President Biden. I can tell you that while they're having talks, and sources were telling me they will talk about difficult issues, no doubt, as mature friends do, but it's not going to cloud over the visit. Many previous visits, I can tell you, used to get clouded by the difficult issue. It's the other way around. One of the negotiators told me that when they were negotiating the joint statement, Unlike the past, where there was acrimony, this time they were looking to find solutions for difficult issues. This is the state of our relationship.
Incredible.
And this is the maturity of the relationship.
And it's not...
They will talk about Ukraine. They will talk about Russia. They will talk about China. In fact, President Biden is going to brief Prime Minister Modi on U.S. Secretary of State Blinken's trip to China. And they know that they have to etch out a blueprint, a framework for the future of Indo-US ties for the next 10 years. This is what you are going to see as a big outcome of the talks. The joint statement itself is a large document. I've been told that they took several months to thrash it out, but it was the smoothest and the most cordial discussions they've ever had.
Okay, Saurabh.
This is the stance of Prime Minister Modi's elevated partnership with the US.
That's incredible. Also with us is our political editor, Aishwarya Kapoor, who is at the lawns of the White House there. Aishwarya, many of the people from the Indians there also came from very far away. They traveled all over. They were very, very enthusiastic out there. Give us a sense of the atmospherics there.
Arnab, absolutely, from Ohio, from Atlanta, and even from Canada. As far as Canada, people from at least 8 states off the West Coast were here. We are right outside the West Wing. Right behind me is the Oval, right behind it, where the bilateral is on between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden. But today, the scenes in the South Lawns of White House were unprecedented. I spoke to certain people who've been in the US for more than 3 decades, Arnab. They said never before have they seen such an electrifying environment and the lawns of the White House being open for any diaspora. This was a first for Prime Minister Modi and for Indians. And we heard the Prime Minister saying that it's a respect being given to India. And he thanked the President and also the Indian diaspora for making it. The people from across the US were here. And even as Saurabh was just mentioning, that this for the first time, the Indian tricolor and the American flag flying high on the first and the second floor of White House is unprecedented. Diplomats, Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval is accompanying the Prime Minister in those bilaterals. Yes or no?
I'll be going across back to you, Aishwarya. For now, former National Security Advisor during the Trump administration, former Ambassador John Bolton also with Republic. Good to see you again, Ambassador Bolton. You've said that a big challenge, and I'm quoting you, that confronts India and the United States is how to deal with China. Now, with an eye on Beijing, what is the best possible outcome you envision out of the bilateral that is currently underway?
Well, I think it would be very important for both countries to continue the progress they've already made in enhancing the security relationship. And I think some of the economic deals that have been announced already demonstrate the importance not just on greater economic trade and cooperation and investment, but have important security ramifications as well. Look, I think what both leaders want to try and do here is enhance peace and security in the region. We're not the ones that are threatening belligerent activity. We're not the ones threatening Taiwan. We're not the ones who are the problem along the long Chinese Indo-Pacific periphery. I think the advancing the Asian security quad, Japan, Australia, India, and the United States will be a big piece of it. I'm sure they'll talk about the implications of the war in Ukraine. There are many issues. It's complicated. There's a lot of history here on both sides, but there's a real imperative to make progress because of the threat we face. We can make plans for it now and hopefully avoid difficulty down the road, or we can ignore it and will, unfortunately, I'm afraid, pay the price when it comes.
You also think, Ambassador Bolton, that we have more negotiating room right now because, as Lloyd Austin said in Singapore a couple of weeks back, a war is not inevitable, but he also said it at a time when the Chinese are getting so belligerent on the Taiwan question, saying they'll do whatever is necessary to fulfill Xi Jinping's dream of vis-a-vis Taiwan. So bottom line is America really, really needs India now, which means we can also perhaps extract more from the US.
Well, I think India needs the U.S. quite a bit, too. We don't have a land border with China. India does. That's been a source of tension since Indian independence. And I think China's efforts to gain even more influence in Pakistan obviously is another source of concern. So this really goes to larger questions. And I think when you look at other Chinese threats around the region, mapping the floor of the Indian Ocean, not because of their interest in increasing fishing supplies, but for security purposes, there's a lot going on in the region. So, when you face a mutual threat, there are a lot of things you can do to cooperate together, some of them represented by these economic deals. But more, I think, growing closer in strategic cooperation, anticipating problems before they manifest themselves, all very, very important.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Bolton. We're all waiting for the joint statement after that. Thank you. That's Ambassador Bolton. Mukesh Agni, who heads the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. This is not a cosmetic. There are no ceremonials. There is real business going on. We've been talking about this. How does... And Abhishek Kapoor wrote a fantastic piece in republicworld.com on how America expects a lot from India. We expect that the Americans will put literally their money where their mouth is. And not just, we had too many years of generalized talk about shared values. We now need to bring it down to business. What do you think, Mr. Agni? Will that happen with this visit?
No, absolutely. I think for the first time, we are saying that India has moved away from what I call as non-alignment movement into alignment movement. That is aligning his interest with countries which are aligned to his interest itself. So I think with the US, what we are seeing is a geopolitical alignment. That means China is a big kahuna in the room itself. But more important is US companies are saying, how do I de-risk my supply chain from China? And India becomes pivotal. And we are seeing day in, day out, a lot of companies coming to us and saying, listen, what can we do to invest, grow, manufacture in India itself? The second factor, what we are seeing is the chemistry between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi. That chemistry is playing a pivotal role. While there's an alignment between two countries, this is accelerating the process of a strong partnership. And the third factor we are seeing is the Indian American diaspora here, which is quite strong. One of the most affluent minority group, one of the most educated. If you look at Biden administration, they have appointed roughly 150 plus Indian Americans to the administration. So we are seeing all the stars are aligned. And US companies are keen to not only just invest in India to secure supply chain, but also go after the growing affluency of Indian purchaser so they can go after the Indian market also. So you will see real investment coming in. But more than that, I think what we're seeing is a trust factor on transfer of complex technologies. Since 1998 sanctions, we have not seen very strong transfer of technology. But now what we are seeing is from J engines to the space station partnership on the education from healthcare, you are seeing a real agenda moving forward between the two countries.
I think you've put it very well, Mukesh. I'd like to take that forward with James Dorsey and then Stephen Golub. Sorry, I'm taking time to come to everyone, just getting a sense of the range of this negotiation with each of our panelists. Mr. Dorsey, when Jake Sullivan says that the US is playing a long game with India, they say, quote unquote, a long game with India, and also recognizes India's deep historic ties with Russia. What does that mean? Does that mean that Biden will overlook the fact or accept the fact that India's imports of Russian crude oil actually reached record highs in May?
Well, fact of the matter is he has accepted it all along. The United States has taken no real steps to interrupt Russian oil sales to India. So I think that's a fact. I want to come back for a moment, if I may, to what John Bolton said. And I think he's right. This is a relationship, or at this point, this is a relationship where both parties need each other. But they need each other for different reasons. And I think what we're seeing over time is a situation where we're going to move from a bipolar to a multipolar world, or a tripolar world in any case. With other words, a world in which you have three great powers. And at that point, I think you're going to see interests diverge. And so I think one's going to put what we're seeing today which is very significant, and I'm not in any way want to diminish that. But I think one also needs to be less breathless and look at it in a larger perspective.
I take your point. I want to take it a step further with Stephen Golub. Stephen, would you like to take that forward? I mean, if I were to take that concept of unipolar, go to bipolar, go to multipolar, would you agree that in the future, say 5 to 10 years from now, India, China, and the United States will be the 3 largest economies in the world? It's inevitable. It could happen in 5 years. It'll certainly happen in 10. In that context, what would America's policy be with a very different India? The India of 20 years back and the India of today would be tremendously transformed. And with the economic transformation of India, I guess more is at stake on both sides. What do you think, Mr. Golub?
I think, well, for one thing, we should take the European Union into account when we're discussing the world's largest and most powerful economies. They're a factor, and they're a political factor as well, with the overlap with NATO. In terms of China, the U.S., and India being a tripolar world, I think it'll be more complicated than that, even though I respect the argument and the perspective along those lines. Among other things, what could affect India is that, in effect, China controls Russia to a good extent. So I think it's wise that India is diversifying its armaments, its technical cooperation, so it becomes less reliant on Russia for armaments, since Russia is very reliant on China in all sorts of ways, not least economically, now and going forward. There's one other element or picture, one other element I'd like to add to this discussion or a perspective, which is that we haven't been discussing shared values very much. And I think, yes, relations between countries are basically based on interests rather than mainly values, but values are a part of the picture, a big part of the picture nevertheless. And there's a big question in terms of the world we live in terms of India and the United States, to the extent to which human rights and democracy continue to be valued. We have challenges in both countries. We have, in our country, we're the last ones who should be throwing rocks, since we live in a glass house ourselves. But with the picture of Donald Trump looming as potentially returning to the presidency, and frankly, with all due respect, with Mr. Modi's actions regarding democracy and human rights in your own country, those are a big part of the picture. They will affect domestic debates and international relations going forward, even as shared interests also will be a very big part of that picture.
Sure, but again, with respect, Mr. Golub, I think America will also have to be increasingly realistic, one. Secondly, I personally believe that America is in no position, given the unfortunate backsliding of democracy in effect in America over the years, to be really speaking to anyone anywhere else in the world on that. I'd like Brahma Chalani to respond to that, then I'm coming to you, Smita and Gaurav. Brahma.
Well, first on the broader issue of Modi's current visit, by fostering greater closeness between the two powers, this visit could prove pivotal in providing a clearer direction to US-India ties. This partnership between the US and India is going to be a unique partnership because it will bear little resemblance to America's alliances. America's alliances have rested on a patron-client framework, with the US as the hub and its allies as the spokes. No such arrangement will work today for the simple reason that a country as large as India cannot become just another Japan or Australia to the US. That is the reason why the Biden administration is seeking to co-opt India in a soft alliance that requires no treaty or other formal arrangement. So in that sense, it will be a really unique partnership between the two. On the issue of India democracy, India is the world's largest democracy, even if an imperfect one. Every democracy is a work in progress, as Secretary of State Blinken said in New Delhi a couple of years ago. But what stands out about India is that it's as politically polarized as the United States is. And just the way Trump was accused while in office of being whatever, a wannabe dictator, of undermining US democracy, etc. Similar accusations are being hurled against Modi by his critics at home and abroad. It's important to remember that all citizens in India, whether Muslims or Hindus, they enjoy equal rights. And anybody who visits India can see that. India remains as free a country as any other established democracy in the world. And in fact, if you look at the debate in India on foreign policy, on strategic issues, it offers a greater diversity of opinions than what you see in the United States. So India is a very free country, yet like any other democracy, it remains a work in progress.
I take that. And please don't take it otherwise, Mr. Golab, but I'd like Smita Prakash, who heads India's largest news agency, ANI, to respond to you. But before she does, just 2 points I'd like to bring from my side before I hand over to Smita. I personally think that it is not necessary for America to try to talk down to any country anymore. It is against American interests. You want to work with India, you will have to respect our democracy. And Mr. Golab, please remember there were enough number of people who would accuse Boris Johnson of being successful in an electoral autocracy. These words are very loosely used in liberal arts departments of certain universities in America and around the world. We are fully aware of the role of the United States of America in unseating democracies around the world and in using its agencies to sponsor dictatorships. However, we are pragmatic enough to know that that cannot be a debating society when leaders meet. We need to talk about the future, and I think it's good we are talking about an alternative supply chain, technology, space, manufacturing. And I think that should be the focus. Since you raised the issue, I'm sure Smita would like to respond. Smita.
Thank you, Arnab. A couple of points that I want to make. One, I'm not in DC this time. I covered PM Modi in 2017 when he was in the White House. I also covered the state visit of Dr. Singh in 2009. Before I come to the point on the two, I just want to say about this whole chemistry issue. Saurabh's view and Mukesh's view is that they have great chemistry, the president and the prime minister. I don't want to disagree, but the personalities of the two are completely different, Arnab. The dissimilarities are so much, yet they don't let that shadow the deep respect that they have for the values that the two countries represent. Sure. Also, it's taken a little time for American presidents to understand that Modi has but one agenda, and that one agenda is India. Now, and India, which is in a hurry, India which wants to which is not expansionist in nature, India that is a democracy, India which wants to be at the high table. In this visit, I agree with what your reporter said, Aishwarya said, that the diaspora element in the White House lawns is different from the 2009 state visit that I covered of Dr. Manmohan Singh and the subsequent visit of Mr. Modi that I covered in DC. It's an acknowledgement of the pivotal role that people-to-people connect has between India and the US, and that the relationship has been shaped by the diaspora. The defense deals are going to be the crown jewels of the visit, which we'll come to, I guess, tomorrow. On the question of, which the gentleman said about Trump returning and about the impact of internal issues on the relationship, look, both India and the US, we are both noisy democracies and free societies which face these kind of challenges. And we meet them as one of the pitfalls or one of the pluses or minuses of being a democracy. We're not somebody who crushes any kind of a dissonance of views or something that happens. Let me tell you, from Trump coming back to power, if he does, is not something that India views as something terrible. From Clinton to Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden, there's been a continuity and a bipartisan support to this relationship with India. And in India, from Vajpayee to Dr. Manmohan Singh to Prime Minister Modi, there's been no second thought about how this relationship is to go forward, whether space to technology, defense cooperation, COVID, cooperation during COVID, from chips to people contact. There's just no hesitation between these two countries. So, President Obama has just sat with the CNN reporter Christian Amanpour and talked about Indian Muslims. Doesn't matter to us. There'll be several points of view. President Obama has a view. He doesn't matter anymore to India as far as India is concerned. We take his point of view with a grain of salt, with a good respect to a former president of America who plays no role absolutely in policy formation in Indo-US ties anymore. So he can talk about concerns that he has with regard to human rights
I think
India
the bigger point,
and Prime Minister Modi.
Yeah, I think the bigger point is also, and if Abhishek can be on screen, I can't see him. The bigger point also to note here, Abhishek, is that whatever certain sections of Americans may say, whatever they may say, and you may want to take that forward with with Charles Kupchan, who has been waiting for a long time, and I'd pick it up with Charles. Charles, the fact is that all the saber rattling post-Ukraine has come to naught. It's a reality. You're compelled to accept the global reality. And I personally think it's a good thing. You may call it, okay, you now have a nuanced understanding of the India-US-Russia relationship, but remember the heated debates we used to have. Charles, when I said America will have to realize that the world will continue to do business with Russia and America will have to do business with the rest of the world. Charles.
I mean, Arnab, there's no question this is a historic day. We're witnessing one of those historical inflection points in which the global distribution of power is shifting, alignments are shifting, and the relationship between the United States and India is moving toward much greater cooperation and alignment than perhaps we've ever seen in history. I do think, however, that we need to be careful to keep our expectations in check, because there are a set of issues that are going to make things difficult. Can you still hear me?
Yes, very much.
Can you still hear me?
I can. Very much. Go on, Charles.
I think I lost the the connection.
Oh, I think I lost the line there. Abhishek, you want to take that forward, Abhishek? You were making that point. Abhishek.
On a couple of points, Eric Girsati, the ambassador of the United States to New Delhi, said that after a long, complicated relationship, India and the United States are finally dating. Now, there is a context why, this dating is happening. We have the oldest president in American history as of this moment. We have had an African leader, Kenya's President William Ruto, who said that we should stop banking with dollar. We should start ditching dollar and think in terms of some way of Pan-African payments. We have a situation where in the last 1 month alone, Arnab, China has militarily challenged the freedom of navigation operations of United States, once in air and once in the Taiwan Straits. We have had a situation where the last 6 months, President of France, Chancellor of Germany, and the European Union Commissioner, they have independently traveled to Beijing and sort of tried to, engage with China independent of the United States. There was a time where US would decide on its own and lead the coalition of the willing. Now it's sort of just supporting the coalition of the unwilling. So I think there is a context in which this engagement or wooing of India is happening, which is that increasingly we are seeing United States, which is no more the sole superpower. It's in a Thucydides trap, as it is called, with China, a rising China, and United States needs a pivot. So it would be prudent that we sort of engage with the United States, look at our own interests, but then at the same time, like we have done over the last year and a half, with the kind of autonomy, sovereign autonomy that we have exercised, that we continue to do so. Remember, even before the joint statement happens, there is already a list of agreements which have been announced, which amount to the tune of about $10 billion. Now, just to put in context, in the last decade or so, India and the United States have had $20 billion worth of defense buyer-seller relationship. And this This visit alone amounts to about $10 billion. So that gives you an idea of, as that Americanism goes, let's talk about money, honey. So I think that part of relations is going to be there. And then, as I said, in the larger geostrategic context, America needs a pivot, and India happens to be a good option.
It signals a big shift. And Charles, I wanted you to make that point, then I'll close up with Gaurav. There was a time. Charles, can you still hear me? I think I lost the line again.
Yes, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so Charles, you know, there was a time when America would say...
No, I've got you.
The Americans would say, those who are not with us are against us. That was the approach earlier, right? Now, maybe America has realized that they can't arm twist India, for example, because we have held our firm ground against Western pressure to boycott Russian oil, and we have also managed to get invited to every Quad alliance and the Indo-Pacific framework. So things are changing, and I think therefore this meeting between Modi and Biden, the nature of the visit, what's happening on the sidelines acquires a bigger significance. Charles.
I agree with that, Arnab. I think the United States is used to having allies that are junior partners. And India is not going to be a junior partner. And it's not going to be an ally in the same way as Germany, Japan, South Korea. We already see that with Ukraine, where the United States and India are having to learn to live with each other. And even on China. I think the Indian position on China and the U.S. position on China are not exactly the same. And India, my guess is, will avoid getting pulled into intense U.S.-China rivalry over Taiwan in the South China Sea. One area where I do think we need to have the conversation is on democracy. You're right to say that there is backsliding in the United States as well as in India and many parts of the world. I don't think the solution is to sweep it under the carpet. I think the solution is to have an honest conversation about it, because this is one of those moments in history in which we will see whether the pendulum swings toward greater freedom or toward lesser freedom. This is one of those historical switching points.
Yeah, but I don't think it's an issue, because there is no issue. Unless I mean, if you want to push the discussion in that area, then I will give you a very blunt response. A, it's none of your business. B, you can't be affected by people who write stilted 500-word pieces in the Washington Post.
It is
you need
my
to
business.
understand the reality here.
No,
One second. Since you pushed it there, I'll say this to you. You need to be aware.
More democracy.
You need to be aware.
More liberal.
You need to be aware. You need to be aware.
System. That's what's at stake.
Your definition of what a democracy should be may not match an Indian definition of democracy. Remember and respect the fact, Charles, and Gaurav will respond better to you on this, that we are the largest democracy in the world. We have the largest Muslim population in the world, right? And we have the greatest diversity of freedoms in the world today. We carry out, unlike your country, I'm sorry, I did not want to push it hard, I don't want this to go down a negative zone, but please do remember our transfers of power in India between governments are peaceful. Unfortunately for you, and I don't know why, I don't know if there's a remedy for this, the violence, the sheer scale of the violence of transitions of power in America is extremely upsetting for us watching in India. And we believe, Gaurav can say it, we believe you are unfortunately in no position at all, underlined, to preach to us about democracy when your CIA, and Brahma will tell you more and can have everyone on the screen on this. When you have been, allow me to unsettle you a little bit more. Allow me to unsettle you a little bit more. When you have been, Charles, listen here. Charles, you can sit. Charles, listen to me. Charles, listen to me. Listen to me, Charles. I mean it well. You can sit in a little corner of Georgetown University and talk about the space for democracy shrinking. I will tell you that historically over decades, you are the world's #1 proponent of dictatorships. No country has contributed to unseating democracy as much as you. I know you use it as a weapon, but I cannot accept that argument. And Gaurav will tell you more on it.
Why aren't you happy to talk about Indian democracy? Come on, Arnab. Let's have a free and fair conversation.
Arnab, I'm having a very free and fair conversation.
Honestly speaking,
and Gaurav will take it further. Thank you.
So, Arnab, very honestly, America has seen better days. America has seen better days, Arnab, from Kabul to Kiev. You know how America has fallen. You know, the American soldiers leaving Kabul in the middle of the night, leaving Kandahar in the middle of the night. And then the American punt, the American gamble in Ukraine falling apart. America sees India as a very important bulwark against an expansionist China, Arnab. Having said that, you're very right and I agree with you. America is the last one to lecture anyone on democracy. Anyone, Arnab. They ensured dictatorship after dictatorship in Pakistan. They looked the other way when Pakistanis were sending terrorists into India. We lost over 80,000 of our citizens to terrorism. America looked the other way. They looked the other way when Pakistan was building up its nuclear arsenal. Because Pakistan was supporting them during the first Afghan jihad in Kabul against the Russians. The Americans have done everything in South America, Arnab. They've used napalm against civilians. They've used atomic bombs against the Japanese civilians. They've done everything. And today we have Americans lecturing us on democracy. We have had Muslim presidents in India. We have had Sikh prime ministers. How many Muslim presidents has America had? Please tell me. There you have it, Arnab.
Absolutely.
There you have it.
Absolutely. It's a clear moment out here. I think Saurabh wants to come in on that. So does Smita.
Yeah.
Brahma,
I just wanted to add one point about lecturing. You know, it's a new India that US is talking to. They realize that whatever the prescription is going to be, we are going to do what we want to do in our self-interest and strategic autonomy under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's foreign policy. That has become the hallmark which the Americans have realized. In fact, you've had Biden administration officials saying it, that about situation in India, that it's a vibrant democracy, there is a rule of law. So wherever this bogey is coming from, okay, there are some things which are taken on record. So when these issues will be discussed, clearly India will have its own point of view on these.
No,
so
I think
it's a very different paradigm that has been set in.
No,
so
I think I'll keep it short. I'll get others in, Saurabh. I think the point is the point the Americans need to understand, and Stephen, you too, and everyone needs to, that India is not just an economic power. It's a country which wields immense power and heft strategically, economically, and in terms of the future. Brahma and Smita, my own take on this would be that the Americans should stop trying to influence India through indirect means. You know, some junket you give to some pro-America people, take them to Hawaii, influence them through a state university funding, lobby. Indirect means will not do. I think the way to approach India is to do business. The elected Prime Minister of India is in Washington. Do business that way. Smita, over to you, please. Smita. And then I'll get Stephen to respond.
Arnab, the Americans lecturing Indians today are academics and op-ed writers, not those who make policies. The American administration has left behind that view about India having a foggy democracy. Those who speak that language are, pardon me, but dinosaurs of the 20th century. There is no hesitation in policymakers of both countries that strategically our cooperation is good for the planet. Not just for the two countries, but good for the planet. Good for billions of people on this planet. Why? Because India is probably the only non-expansionist democracy. It's always been non-expansionist and it still is. While we come to the high table, we don't wish to rule any part of the world. We're not a China trying to make a Belt and Road Initiative and get over Europe. No, we're not. It's never been in our DNA. And that's going to be the takeaway. That's unshakable partnership between India and the US. And yes, US and India do not see eye to eye on many geopolitical issues. We do not have shared values. No, we don't. There are just very few values that the two countries share. But we respect that we have a different set of values, you have a different set of values, but we can do business together.
Yes.
It's beyond just transactional relationship now. It has a future. And I don't think there should be anybody jeopardizing this if you value the good of the planet in your mind and in your world.
Yeah, to an extent, I agree. And Stephen, we don't share the values that you have when you ran Guantanamo Bay. We don't share the Guantanamo Bay values. No civilized country can, where you hold detainees outside of normal laws. These are America's ways of doing things. It's America's way of doing things. Today, there are 9,500 migrants living under a bridge in the Texas border. You have a terrible state of affairs on various fronts, on humanitarian fronts, Stephen. But I will not lecture you on that. I will not lecture you on your armed conflict involvement in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Niger, your drone strikes, the number of civilians you kill, because when I need to, I will. So you need to understand, don't preach. It will not be accepted. You are in no position to, because you have a soft underbelly on these issues, Stephen, a very soft underbelly.
So may I reply now?
Yes, sure, please do.
Okay, well, thanks for the non-lecture on human rights and democracy and the like. Just to be clear, I agree with a lot of what's been said here about criticisms of the US human rights record. And I would take it back even further in history to the egregious respect in which the US handled and backed Pakistan when it tried to suppress Bangladesh, when it committed massive human rights violations there. Those violations were brought to a halt laudably by India intervening in that conflict, and we have an independent Bangladesh now that, for all of its problems, is better off by virtue of India's getting involved in that conflict, saving the day and preventing more Pakistani human rights abuses there. In terms of other things you said about the human rights record of the US, yes, I basically agree. I think we've done a lot of harm around the world in lots of ways. Our human rights record domestically is far, far from perfect. But for that very reason, I say it's legitimate, just as it's legitimate for you to criticize the United States human rights record at home and abroad. Whether you call it a lecture or not, I don't know. I don't want to get too into defining what that word means.
Brahma.
But just as it's legitimate for you to criticize the US, I think it's legitimate for people in other countries to bring to light the problems with India's human rights and democracy record.
Yes,
and part of that is to allow other speakers in your own program to make their comments rather than cutting them off. I appreciate your letting me continue, but rather than cutting off other speakers who may be voicing something that's different from what your point of view. Now, moving forward, I'd say the big picture around the world, big picture around the world, yes, there are geostrategic calculations to be brought into account, business interests brought into account. But one of the defining features of the 21st century right now is whether democracy or authoritarianism will prevail around the world.
And
we are facing that in our own country. If I may just finish, we're facing that in our own country in a very vital way. We saw January 6th in our own country an attempt to take over the capital, to overturn an election. Thankfully, you in India, and to your credit, you haven't had something like that. But there's a threat to democracy here. There's a threat to democracy in India. And with all mutual respect, it's okay for us to talk about it, just as you've criticized us, the America. I think it's appropriate, or it's okay for India's record to be debated and criticized in various ways. There's nothing wrong with that. It's called, mutual respect.
Yeah. Now, Stephen, it's good. It's good to.
That you don't want to have this conversation on the show is a sign of the shrinking space for public debate. Why don't you want to have the conversation?
Charles, I want to, but I feel that
it's important.
I feel, Charles, that because I am countering you with fact, you're getting upset. Now, let me give you one defining image of which stays with me.
I'm not getting
Charles,
upset.
Charles, allow me to. There's a spirit of tolerance. You need to listen to these things. Charles, you need to listen to these things with a spirit of tolerance. Tolerance is the heart of democracy. At the heart of democracy, Charles, always remember, is the spirit of tolerance. Now, commentary is good, but never use democracy as a lever. The unfortunate thing is that we are all aware that you have used the word democracy as a lever. And not only on Republic, but globally, you're being challenged for what you've done. Now, when countries intervene outside their borders, there are defining images, for example. India's intervention in what was East Pakistan became Bangladesh led to the birth of a democracy in Bangladesh. I have in my mind the cruel images of Afghans holding on to a transport plane of America as you handed over Afghanistan to the Taliban. And you come here and you lecture us on democracy.
Arnab, you keep
no, Charles, you have to. Charles, you have to reconcile with these facts. And I request you, since you're a professor, to tell one of your doctoral students to do a full PhD on this subject. Please do. You need to be honest and open about it. You're in denial, Charles. Please don't be. Please don't be. These are realities that we have to reconcile, for you have a flawed democracy at work.
Democracy in India.
Anyway, we'll debate it another time.
About democracy in the United States.
We'll debate it another time. We are all aware. We're all aware we have a big visit happening right now. That's extremely good. We will talk about all of these things another time, but please, important for you to realize there is another perspective to things. Ladies and gentlemen, as we bring you this live broadcast, the meeting at the Oval Office is happening, and this happens at a time when Prime Minister Modi has ensured that India is not only the largest neutral power in the world, but the only strategic counterweight to China. India is a power that cannot be ignored. Prime Minister Modi is leading the way. Take a look and then we debate.
Prime Minister Modi's visit is not just about optics. He means business.
एक्सेलेंस, आप हमेशा भारत के एक बहुत अच्छे शुभचिंतक रहे और जब भी आपको जहां भी अवसर मिला है, आपने हमेशा भारत और अमेरिका के संबंधों के महात्म्य को बहुत बड़ा बल दिया है.
And business it is. With signing of big deals and a grand reception, the voice of the Global South is being heard in the White House.
We see it in our economic ties and efforts to promote inclusive economic growth for our people and, quite frankly, people all around the world.
And that's why when Prime Minister Modi speaks at the US Congress next, both the Republicans and Democrats will be listening to the voice that matters globally.
It's going to be important that we continue to develop our economic ties, our military ties, exercises, all kinds of things we're going to have with the most strategically important ally we have in the region. We know what's going on in that area. We want to make sure that we continue to have goodwill towards the largest and the oldest democracies in the world. I'm looking forward to it, and I look forward to meeting him in person.
This historic relationship will ensure that we have peace in that region.
India is changing the rules of diplomacy, and the world is watching. Let's debate.
Michael Tracy is with us. Abhishek continues. Kamal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary and Indian Ambassador to Turkey, Egypt, France and Russia, is with us this evening. We have Michael Tracy. We have Peter Kuznick, Professor at American University and the Director of the Nuclear Studies Institute there. So thank you very much. Now, Mr. Sibal, lot at stake. Good to have you. I heard your astute analysis earlier this evening on Republic. Just before Prime Minister Modi was being received at the White House, you saw the pictures there. You've been on these kind of occasions. So I want to start with you first and the pictures on the screen. What did you think of the reception and what the ceremonials indicate to you beyond the substantive part?
Well, since it was a state visit, the ceremonial goes with it. It is clear that the US President and the US administration in general wanted to make this a special occasion to give prominence to bilateral ties with India and send a signal to the US public and the US establishment at large that the United States is now embarked on a new relationship with India, that India is going to figure very importantly in US strategy in the coming years, especially in the context of challenges that both countries are facing, and not merely with regard to regional challenges in the Indo-Pacific, but much larger challenges that the world faces, the collapse of multilateralism, the fragmentation of the world, the disruptive policies that are being pursued by certain powers, the general breakdown also of the economic system, and of course the issue of Africa's poverty, debt, and all those things, and the larger questions of connectivity, and finally that there should be an alternative technological frame which can provide what is needed by the rest of the world and should not be dependent on virtually a single source, which is non-transparent, which is opaque, and which leverages its control over many of these areas to extract geopolitical benefits. It's a tall task because technology can't be developed overnight. But India has the talent, United States has both the talent and the resources, and together we can scale up this and accelerate the technology that is needed in terms of meeting the needs of our respective population and the world in general. So therefore, I think this state visit with all the ceremonial that goes with it is a very important message. And of course, in addition to this, is the fact that the Indian community, 5,000 of them, unprecedentedly were invited to the White House lawns to witness the ceremony. It is, in a sense, if you like, focus on the value that the Indian American community is bringing to the United States and bringing to the India-US relationship. This will galvanize them further. And mind you, there might be a little bit of a electoral calculation there too, because elections are coming next year. And if the Indian American community can vote for the Democrats, why not? I mean, this is politics. And finally, I would say that two things which are very important. The 70 congressmen have written to the president that he should raise human rights issues and all that with Mr. Modi. And we've known this kind of guerrilla warfare that is being going on by some legislators in the United States of America. And this is the progressive wing of the Democratic Party largely. But what is remarkable is that the Democratic president and his Democratic administration are not accepting this kind of guerrilla warfare from within the Democratic Party against India, and have gone against the grain of a section of the Democratic Party and are signaling that while these issues may be important and can be raised privately, but this is not the centerpiece of our relationship. And because of this pressure by not only the US congressmen, but the US media and think tanks and others, in fact, the White House has gone on to say publicly that they respect Indian democracy, that India is a vibrant democracy. They're giving us clean chits as a democratic country when there is
not that we need it.
A lot of attack on us.
Not that we need it, Mr. Sybil, but it's noted. My point of worry is: are we somewhere raising American expectations too much vis-a-vis the China issue? That's my point, and to get the sense of that, I want to go to Peter Kuznick first. Professor Kuznick, we will always do what is in our supreme self-interest and national interest. We've shown it after Ukraine. We won't budge an inch. We won't go out of our way even a millimeter to make any other country happy. There was so much pressure on us. Are Americans clear about that? We are not going to get drawn into your fight with China. We have our own fight with China and we deal with it on a tactical level. Is it clear to the Americans that we're not in your corner? We'll do business with you. We're not in your corner. Your fight with China is your own. We have our own land border issue to settle and we are doing that beautifully over the years. What do you say, Professor Kuznick?
I say that intelligent Americans understand that India is not going to play the Cold War game. The United States is now in the process of conducting a two-front Cold War against Russia and against China. And one of the things that became very apparent over Ukraine is that the U.S. military-industrial complex has atrophied over the years. And the United States does not have the capability to provide all the weapons that Ukraine has been asking for. And on one hand, on the other hand, there's the growing tension between the United States and China. Blinken just got back from his visit to Beijing, and it was extremely unsuccessful. So the United States now confronts two major enemies. And if it's going to gear up to be capable of confronting both of them, it needs some support from India. Not so much political, diplomatic support.
What does some support mean?
Support means India has research.
Peter Kuznick, what is some support in clear terms?
Research and technological manufacturing capabilities.
Clear.
The United States is pushing for India to pick up the slack that it itself can't develop in terms of the weapons production.
So
the new
weapons
GE
production,
deal
manufacturing, research.
Jets. Yeah, exactly.
Anything
and
more?
So India is not going to give up its neutrality, but it's going to use the United States in order to build up its own technological and defense capabilities. So I agree with you that India is not going to.
Yeah, can I just have can I have Michael respond to that? Yes, Michael, you wanted to add that. My fundamental point, Michael, is what does America expect from us vis-a-vis China?
And it's probably the most pertinent and necessary question to ask, because if what the Indian American congressman who was played at the beginning of the segment, Mr. Thanadar, said comes to pass, and India and the U.S. forge closer ties on a variety of fronts, including military ties, then it should be more plainly communicated what the current military/security strategy is of the United States vis-a-vis China. Because although we're all aware of the historic issues that have surfaced between India and China, launching a full-fledged war in the South China Sea is an entirely different thing. And it should be more forthrightly communicated that, for example, one of the guests that you had on earlier, John Bolton, the former Trump administration and Bush official who resigned and is now at loggerheads with Trump, he visited recently in Taiwan with the leader, Tsai. And as you may know, John Bolton is one of the absolute most hawkish, you might even say belligerent advocates of a foreign policy perspective in the United States. And President Tsai, or the leader Tsai of Taiwan, is increasingly aligning herself with the prerogatives of this more hawkish element in the United States security establishment. And the U.S. is increasingly bolstering its military posture in and around Taiwan, including at the northern tip of the Philippines, where it just opened 2 new bases this year, to prepare, and some might argue even potentially instigate, a war with China over Taiwan. So if the U.S. is attempting to enlist India in its strategy in this regard, and people in the U.S. and India are saying they welcome and celebrate potentially closer military ties, one of these military, quote, ties that the U.S. is currently promoting is essentially a preparation to wage unprecedentedly massive and destructive warfare against China, and for India to play some sort of supporting role in that conflict, which I can't doubt to be India's self-interest.
So, Saurabh, before you come in, I want Gaurav to respond to that. Watching very keenly, Gaurav, from a defense perspective, and Kamal Sibbal, who's one of our leading ambassadors from a diplomatic perspective. I like the fact, Michael, that you're pushing the envelope on this. But my own sense is, Gaurav, that's great for India. You want India to be a counterweight to China in trade, artificial intelligence, a space.
Do you want to fight a war against China?
I'm not sure of that at all, in fact.
Well, that's what the United States is
I think we made our
militarily.
position. No, I think we made our position clear post-Ukraine. Your wars are not our wars. Gaurav, what do you think?
Arnab, I just want to tell our American friends here on the panel that we were fighting the Chinese when the Americans were standing against us. We were fighting the Chinese when they were sending their 7th fleet to aid Pakistan. We have fought the Chinese in 62, we fought them in 67, and very recently we fought them in Galwan. We had a face-off in Tawang. We have been facing the Chinese along the 3,600 kilometer long line of actual control. So if there is any country that has recently seen action against the Chinese, it is India, and in some part, Vietnam. Now, having placed that on the table, I would like to tell our American friends that yes, we do need American technology, of course. And I think Americans make the finest weapons in the world. But I would like to ask my American friends, what happened to your American technology in Kabul? What happened to your American technology in Vietnam? What happened to your American weapon systems in Korea? What happened to your American weapon systems in Iraq? And what happened to your famous Patton tanks? Sir, let me tell you,
I was agreeing
then
with
the
your
problem
point,
with the Americans is American soldiers. Because that is exactly what I'm telling you, sir. Please give me 1 minute, sir. Please give me 1 minute. You've just shot yourself in the foot. When American soldiers use American equipment, America loses wars. This is the point that I'm trying to make. You lost Vietnam, you lost Korea, you lost Iraq, you lost Afghanistan. It is the man behind the weapon who's more important. Today, American soldiers are not fighting in Ukraine. It is American weapons that are being used. What happens to American weapons when Americans use American weapons? This is my question to you. Can you name one instance after 1945, the Second World War, where America, the lone superpower currently in the world, has conclusively won a war, a conventional or a non-conventional battle or counterinsurgency using American weapons against an adversary who was probably, in the immortal words of Farid Zakaria, using fourth-grade Russian weapons? Can you tell me that?
I was agreeing with your point entirely. In fact, I was trying to further support your point by noting that just as American technologies are unaccounted for in Afghanistan and in the past Vietnam and so forth, just so today is there a huge black hole around the ultimate destination of various Ukraine technologies that are being flooded into Ukraine militarily in terms of weapon systems and so forth that are still being concealed from the public in terms of the true scope of that intervention. But the ultimate point is, I was in agreement with you with, and the Ukraine angle actually further bolsters the point as well, because what the U.S. was trying to do in Ukraine from 2014 to 2022 was all in the name of deterrence, meaning militarizing Ukraine, having increasingly belligerent and confrontational drills held in Ukraine, just like they've been doing in the South China Sea, furthering what they call military-to-military interoperability with Ukraine, all to deter, quote-unquote, Russia from invading. Well, what happened? Russia was not, quote, deterred, and the deterrence strategy itself was probably more like a provocation or instigation. That's what they're replicating in Taiwan right now, exactly, and that's what they're trying to recruit India into playing second fiddle to, which I think, in light of the history that you just laid out there, it has a very strong potential of being counterproductive.
See, Michael, I think what you and Gaurav are saying in a way is the same thing. But I would like Peter to come in on this. Saurabh wants to come in on this. Kamal Sibbal, I would like to go to him again. But, yes, Ambassador Sibbal, I want to just say one thing, Ambassador Sibbal. They are responsible for their expectations and we are responsible for our commitments. If the Americans expect us to be part of an unspoken military alliance vis-a-vis China, that is their expectation, but it is not our commitment. We have our own battle with China to fight. As Gaurav has said, we have ably fought it for over 5 decades and more. Maybe you can make your point and then Peter Kuznick will respond, then I'll take it forward.
Okay.
Yes.
There are a few things. One is that we are having major naval exercises with the United States in the Indian Ocean, in which now Japan and Australia are also taking part. We are having joint military exercises with United States land, sea, and air bilaterally, and including Thai service exercises. We've signed all the foundational agreements with the United States so as to make the acquisition of technology easier. They have declared us as a major defense partner. They've given us STA1 tier status. So again, with the objective of making the transfer of technology easier. And now, finally, we are discussing the ICET, which will involve more easing of technology transfers to India. We are weak in some areas, especially we were weak in terms of a heavy lift capacity. So we bought the C-17s and the C-130s. We are weak in the ISR area. And there again, United States can help us during the Galwan crisis. I believe we were actually given some real-time intelligence which helped us. Now, thing is that we have concerns of our own in terms of maritime security in the Indian Ocean. We are the most powerful navy in the Indian Ocean. There's no other country in Asia or Europe or anywhere else which has any significant presence or power, naval presence and naval power in the Indian Ocean. Therefore, there is a clear community of interest with regard to the threat from China that the United States takes charge of the Western Pacific and the problems that are being faced there with regard to Chinese expansionism. But China, if it succeeds in pushing back the United States in the South China Sea and in that area and breaks through the first island chain, they will come into the Indian Ocean. This may take 5 years, this may take 10 years. And it is here that United States and India can work together to beef up and strengthen India's surveillance capabilities. And that is where the PI-8 reconnaissance aircraft become very important. I know that the United States has begun to share with us underwater sea technology to keep tabs on Chinese submarines. And of course, in the area of maritime domain awareness, there's good cooperation between the two countries. So I think there are areas in which we can very profitably cooperate with each other. But the United States knows that we are not. You see, it's a different matter that the strategic community and think tanks, and they talk about integrated strategic deterrence, and India must become part of the U.S. Military dispositions against China in case there's a Taiwan threat. We must get involved in this. This is coming from the outside. I don't think that the U.S. administration seriously thinks that we will do that. They have seen what is happening today with China. We have had 18 rounds of military level discussions, about 26, 27 rounds of diplomatic discussions. We are actually negotiating with China. We're keeping our channels of communication with China open. We don't want to get into a situation where we become entirely dependent on China, on United States to deal with China. We don't want that. We want to keep that degree of strategic autonomy, and United States accepts that. I think there is a community of interest where there is a degree of burden sharing, which is in our interest, because there's a looming China challenge. Their maritime silk strategy, so-called, is very threatening. They have been very threatening in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar, in Bangladesh. They're trying very hard. In Maldives, they tried, but fortunately, they have had a setback there. In the east coast of Africa, they're very active, which is why we have joined up with France, and we have very good maritime cooperation with France to keep tabs on the Chinese incursions into East Africa, where France has a lot of interest, the Union and all that. So I think I would not want to just reject cooperation with the United States on the ground that they are seeking to push us into a confrontation with China. They haven't been able to break our links with Russia, despite all the moral lecturing and pressure on us. They have become pragmatic. They've accepted that. And with regard to China also, they will accept a degree of strategic autonomy of India in dealing with China. And at the same time, in our own interest, we will find it advantageous to cooperate with the United States to the extent that we can do burden sharing without getting involved into any physical conflict by the United States in the South China Sea.
I don't think, and as I...
And last point is this.
Yes.
Look at Macron himself. The interview he gave to Politico. He said he opposed America's policies towards Taiwan. He said they are dragging Europe into this, and we don't want to be a camp follower. He was very clear about that. Now, if a NATO ally of the United States is publicly saying we don't want to get dragged into a conflict with Taiwan, where the United States actually, in their views, is mishandling the China situation, how do they expect us, India, to become part of that?
No, I don't think it's in American interest either. I don't think America can afford it. Professor Kusnik, I'm taking Kamal Sibal's response and what Michael said just before that. And the word Michael used was attempted instigation. I think America realizes that to create a science fiction situation of a future conflict is easy to do in textbooks. But the sobering reality of America's misfortunes militarily at a global level, which Gaurav very ably narrated, must also come into account. So I feel it's okay to talk about working together on trade, industry, manufacturing, use India as a manufacturing counterweight to China, etc., but not as a potential ally for a future military conflict with China. It's probably easier to do that academically than realistically. Professor Kusnik.
Yes, the danger is that India is going to get in bed with the United States. There are many people in the United States who are pushing for NATO expansion to Asia now. They see this NATO plus vision. The recent committee called for that. And they say, we want India to be part of that. Now, you have to look at the broader picture of what the U.S. is doing in Asia. The U.S. is militarizing the Pacific. You look at Japan doubling its military spending. You look at Australia, the Philippines, 4 new U.S. bases. Australia, part of the AUKUS agreement. South Korea, the Yoon government, is part of a broader building up of a military posture across the Pacific that the Americans have this fantasy that India will be part of. Now, Indian leaders are smarter than that, and they're not going to fall for that. But the overall context, especially in the aftermath of this Russian invasion of Ukraine, is that the West is realizing that it has real needs, that India can satisfy some of those needs in terms of military hardware, military production, and cooperation. But it's in India's interest to push for a peaceful Pacific, for a peaceful Indian Ocean. It's also in America's interest. The world lost one of its great people this week, Daniel Ellsberg. And what Daniel Ellsberg was not just a whistleblower, he was the leading warning about the risks of nuclear war. And we see that the threats going back and forth over Ukraine. And what would the United States do? The Pentagon has run 18 war games over a war between the United States and China over Taiwan. And China has won all 18 war games. General Minihan, Army General Minihan, has said recently that he thinks there's going to be a war between the United States and China by 2025. America's window of opportunity they see as between now and 2025. That would be madness. And for India to be drawn into that in any way would certainly not be in India's interest, but the possibility of any of these conflicts evolving into a nuclear war is more real now than at any time since 1962. So the world needs to step back, and India needs to play a leading role, because none of the other world leaders are playing that kind of role right now. But for Modi to play a positive role, tamping down the conflicts, looking for peaceful resolutions, the way that India has not jumped onto the United States side in the Ukraine war, the fact that the global South overall has not gone along with U.S. sanctions is in many ways positive. While the Russian invasion is monstrous and should not be condoned, the fact is that adding fuel to that fire would be a big mistake, and India can play a leading role in leading the world out of this hyper-militarism that's occurring across Europe, across the Pacific, and across much of the world.
Abhishek, I want you to give your response to that. We are having a very deep discussion on this, and ladies and gentlemen, while I wait for Abhishek's response, and we are watching this keenly, a lot of people following us right now. We have millions following this broadcast between broadcast and television, and many people tuning in late tonight, especially because they know that in some time from now we have likely joint statement. I think that should be out soon, and the content of that joint statement will be discussed and deliberated. We also know that very early our time here is the arrival of Prime Minister Modi once to the U.S. Congress, the address of the U.S. Congress a couple of hours from now or less, and then the state dinner. So it's all-night telecast. Now, Abhishek, give a considered response to this view. We may be dismissive of it, but we have various American thinkers, Michael and Professor, right now, who have highlighted the fact that you may not have this in your game plan, as Peter says, but there is a military establishment in America which is hungry for conflict. We know it. And the suggestion is that you may not plan for it, but you may get drawn into it. Kamal Sibal says from his experience that we have a choice not to, but I think the accidental aspect of this, that this may happen without your planning, is being reinforced by Peter Kuznick. Peter, Abhishek Kapoor is our senior executive editor and very, very well informed on strategic affairs. His response to you, please. Thank you, Abhishek.
Arnab, if I were a strategic hawk, I would say if the Taiwan war happens, if the Chinese take Taiwan, we would take POK, we would use that opportunity of turmoil to take care of our own strategic interests. But having said that, I don't think the military-industrial complex in the United States is powerful enough to really impose choices on us. We have seen that happening in the recent past. But more importantly, the examples that Professor gave about the Japanese increasing their budget or doubling it, the Germans doing it, I think it's essentially because the Americans are really overstretched. For example, their expenditure or their budget on NASA is at its lowest post the Apollo spike when the Americans went to moon as percentage of GDP. So in that sense, I think it's actually the Americans who are hemmed in for choice. They are in fact pivoting on India, irrespective of whatever amount of charm offensive that they might try on India. I think we have very prudent minds working and we know how to take care of our interests.
But it's not just a matter of speculating about what the machinations of the military-industrial complex might be. The military-industrial complex is a nebulous concept. Just look at what Joe Biden himself has said. On 4 separate occasions, Joe Biden has pledged to attack China militarily in the event of some incursion or attempt to annex Taiwan. So Joe Biden has publicly committed the U.S. to a military conflict with China in the event of some action around Taiwan. So when you have members of Congress, as the person who introduced this segment did, Congressman, the Indian American congressman from Michigan, he said that he wants this trip, this state visit, to result in the fortification of bilateral military ties between the U.S. and India. Not just economic ties, not just diplomatic or cultural ties, military ties are also being stressed. So if that's the tie that is intending to be fortified here, the Indian public and the American public should have a more clear understanding of what its leaders are saying that would entail. The U.S. isn't about to just kind of write off India as a neutral bystander in the event of some cataclysmic conflict in the South China Sea. Now, India might not follow along with whatever the U.S. is pursuing, but what the U.S. is pursuing should, again, be clarified with more specificity because they're not even being subtle about it. Last December, the U.S. Congress passed a defense authorization bill that enabled Joe Biden to use the same authorities that he's been sending weapons to Taiwan, Ukraine with, to Taiwan. Same authorities called the Presidential Drawdown Authority. They are viewing these conflicts through the same prism. They've been trying to enter India into abiding the U.S. policy in Ukraine since February of last year. It hasn't worked, and they're going to use it now. Same strategy with Taiwan because they know long-standing animosity between China and India, and they feel that they can leverage that to pursue their own strategic interest.
From Chinese soil, listen. Antony Blinken from Chinese soil just 3 days back said that do not support Taiwanese independence. I think
They've
it
always
was
said
a
that.
giveaway. The Americans have blinked. And the Chinese know that
That's
they
a
have
perfunctory
blinked.
statement.
So it's not
They've
a
always
question
said
of
that.
whether the Americans actually can militarily intervene if they
Joe
want
Biden
to.
has pledged to
Like the
back
professor
China
said,
for
18 war games, all of them Chinese won. So obviously, the choices are more difficult. That's the point I'm making. The choices are more difficult for the Americans to make than for them to be in a position, in the first instance, to be forcing the choices on India.
Well, I think the U.S. has diminished in its capacity to successfully coerce or cajole a country like India, which is now, as of this year, or last year was it, the most populous country on earth, obviously an ascendant economic power. The U.S. is no longer able to so easily propound its dictates and India abide by them, and yet that's still going to be the attempt to dictate. I mean, look at AUKUS. This is a new military alliance that the U.S. and the UK and Australia have forged in this vicinity specifically to prepare for what they are increasingly treating as an inevitable military conflict. It's going to have U.S. bases in Australia. There was even a new deal brokered just this past spring with Papua New Guinea to escalate U.S. military presence in that country with an eye toward a conflict in Taiwan. So whether or not the U.S. could successfully bring India into the fold, again, I do think it behooves everyone in this discussion to be a little bit more forthright and explicit about what these glorious military ties that the U.S. wants to establish or maintain or fortify with India, what those ties are actually entailing in practice. Because whatever Blinken said in India, or in China rather, a few days ago, the fact remains that every administration for decades has repeated that perfunctory admonition about adhering to a one China policy, but it's only been Joe Biden in the past couple years who explicitly, Donald Trump never did this, but Joe Biden is doing it, explicitly avowing his intent to initiate a war over Taiwan with China. Joe Biden has done that 4 times explicitly, never repudiated
I'm sure.
it, and that's the agenda that he's taking along with his administration.
I'm sure. I want Kamal Sibal to respond to you. I understand your concern. The way we look at it, however, and we'll stay with the pictures there, ladies and gentlemen, because the joint statement should be coming out in a few minutes. Kamal Sibal would probably put it better. The way we look at it is that we will not join NATO, we will not join NATO plus, we will not join NATO plus to the square root of infinity or to the power of infinity. The fact is we are happy to join bigger security frameworks because it works for us in the short term. It's good
Arnab,
for
let
us.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah, what do you, okay, one second. What are you asking, Michael? Yeah, go on.
I'm asking you a very quick question.
Yes.
For instance, will India acquiesce to the U.S. plan that it initiated legislation to allow itself to participate in the International Criminal Court proceedings in these international tribunals, which in March, one of them issued an arrest warrant on Vladimir Putin? So the idea is that any state that's a signatory to the International Criminal Court is obliged to arrest Vladimir Putin, put him into custody, put him on trial. That's what the U.S. is increasingly explicitly supporting.
I see several hands go up there. Michael, listen, Michael. Fact of the matter is, the world has changed, Michael. You're with us or against us. Will you commit? Won't you? If you don't, what else then? No choice. I'm sorry, but those days are over. But Kamal Sibal raised his hand when you said that. We are just saying, let's be bipartisan about things. Let's deal with each other like mature adults. Let's not expect each other to play each other's games. We won't. But Kamal Sibal, sharp question from Michael, and your take, please.
Two things, of course. We are not signatories to the International Criminal Court. In fact,
neither is the US.
Was ambassador here, and I was the foreign secretary, and he wanted India and United States to jointly oppose the International Criminal Court. And I told him that we have our own reasons to oppose it, but we're not going to join with you because your reasons are different. So there's no question of India following any decision by the International Criminal Court. Secondly, what I'm a little surprised about this debate is that it is being done on the assumption that China is a peaceful country or a peace-loving country, a non-expansionist country. It doesn't want conflict. In fact, the entire business of Indo-Pacific and everything else started because they started militarizing reclaiming rocks and islands in the South China Sea, positioning their missiles there, making runways and this and that, as part of their inherited sovereignty. As Yang Jiechi said, that we will not surrender an inch of territory that has been bequeathed to China by its ancestors. A ridiculous formulation. There's a new formulation in international law as part of this 9-dash line, and rejecting the Court of Arbitration decision against them. And the whole idea is to push the United States away from the Western Pacific through area denial capabilities and everything else, which makes Japan very vulnerable. And United States has certain inherited defense alliances, but it's for America to see how it deals with them. But Japan is not an insignificant power. We have very, very good ties with Japan. We are interested that Japan should not be exposed to Chinese threats beyond a certain measure. Anyway, that is one aspect of it in terms of. The other is that look at what China is doing on our borders. We have absolutely no aggressive designs against Tibet or China. We are not involved in terrorism in Tibet. We accepted Tibet as part of China. Why have they militarized Tibet so much, and they continue to militarize it? They have positioned missiles. They have developed new airports. They have built new concrete hangars for their planes, etc., etc. They are threatening us, while we are not threatening them at all. They have given every means to Pakistan, including when Pakistan is collapsing. They have signed a $5 billion deal to set up another nuclear power plant, which Pakistan can't afford. So they have a very aggressive long-term strategy towards us in order to be the only tiger on the mountain in Asia, and the only challenge is going to come from India. Therefore, China is not a peaceful country. America may or may not be a peaceful country. But if America can contain China in the South Pacific, in the South China Sea, in the Western Pacific, it helps us. It will delay the ingress of China into the Indian Ocean. Why are they creating the biggest navy in the world? Even today, the navy is larger in terms of size than the American Navy, do not in tonnage. And they are developing God knows how many new nuclear silos, etc. So what are they doing for? Because their strategy is very clear, that they want to protect their lines of communication, which are very vulnerable in the Indian Ocean. That's where the threat is to us. And if, to my mind, the United States can take on the burden, wisely or foolishly, in containing China in the Western Pacific, it helps us. Frankly, it helps.
Yeah, I just want to read one tweet which came in right now from SS2167KHW. Okay. It says on the Motorola moment, a quick tweet, aside from the fact that the real reason that USA was egging Ukraine was the purpose of a weapons market and jacking up oil prices, the US would do well not to bracket India with the old chains that used to be the norm in the days of Henry Kissinger. And that's a very, very apt tweet on the Motorola moment. Taking this forward, Abhishek and Gaurav wanted to respond. Reminder, slightly delayed, which means the talks are going on for longer than has been scheduled. Good sign, Abhishek. I think it's okay. So I think it'll take another 15-20 minutes at least. Abhishek, you wanted to respond to Michael's point as well, and of course we'll go full frame to the pictures as Abhishek makes his point.
I wanted to make two quick points.
Yeah.
I want to make two quick points on Michael's what Michael was saying. You see, just about 3 days back, Vladimir Putin did a presser, and I believe he showed documents of an agreement that was reached between Moscow and Kiev, which was sabotaged by the Americans, according to him, according to Vladimir Putin, because he said that the West actually does not want the war to end. Otherwise, the Ukrainians were ready to sort of call for truce in the first month of the war itself. So it's not that things are not possible. Also, Arnab, I recall an Arnold Toynbee quote, which is that America is like a big friendly dog in a small room. So even if it wags its tail with love, it knocks down a chair or two. So we need the Americans. We need the United States, their technology, their investments, and we need a friendly America on our side. But that does not mean we're going to allow them to make choices for us. That's not mean we're going to allow them to knock down a chair or two for us. So I think that really answers the points that Mike was raising about the choices that we have. And we have a very smart leadership. Remember, when Prime Minister sort of added to his comment on this is not an era of war, he said we are not neutral, we are on the side of peace. And so in effect he was holding a mirror to the West and to the America that see, if we to talk about peace and not this not being an era of war, it applies equally to West to be not putting Ukraine in a situation where you are fighting the war to the last Ukrainian is standing, or perhaps you might do it with Taiwan 5 years later. That's not the strategy that should be. Americans, unfortunately, with their visceral hate for Russia or Putin, have put themselves in a situation where they have given extra leverage to the Chinese in that region, with Russia firmly in Xi Jinping's lap.
Yeah, and
Arnab,
Gaurav, as I bring you into the debate, I want to just stay with the pictures. Gaurav, quick point here that we are expecting, ladies and gentlemen, the joint statement, and then post midnight will be Prime Minister's address to the US Congress. And this particular event is important globally. It's also happening at a time, Gaurav, when we have enough leverage with the rest of the world. We have P5 members, dozens of other countries who are supporting us for a permanent UN Security Council seat. We are playing a very active role in playing the voice for the Global South, for the African Union, for the inclusion of the African Union in the G20. And therefore, it marks a shift in India's foreign policy play. I'll be very curious to look at what comes out in the joint statement. Gaurav.
Very quickly, Arnab, 2 points. Taking further, what Abhishek said. Putin actually put tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus and nobody could do anything about it. And they have already announced that anybody who joins our blocks, we are going to start distributing nuclear weapons like cookies. And nobody's going to be able to do anything about that either. The second point that I want to make about China is war with China is coming, whether for India or for the USA. It's going to happen. With us, they've already pushed in the Himalayas. With the US, they'll push in the oceans. And I think the United States has got a bigger role to play than India. And I'll tell you why, Arnab, very quickly. 30 seconds more. United States is funding China, and it happens through Wall Street. How does China make its money, Arnab? It makes its money through contract manufacturing. All American brands are made in China. Very recently, Germany took out a national security document and they said China is the biggest threat. But which are the 5 major brands of the Germans which are made in China? You have Mercedes, made in China, Audi, BMW, Hugo Boss, Adidas. All these are made in China, Arnab. So you're funding China, but saying that China is building up its military prowess. Of course it will. The problem lies with Wall Street. Decouple with China, and that is the only way you can control China. Decouple as soon as possible. Decouple at frantic pace. Get out of China. That is the only way you can save. Otherwise, China is coming. There will be war. China is looking for conflict, and China believes that China should take center stage, and the only thing stopping China in Asia is India, and globally it is America. Otherwise, there is no stopping China. I think it's upon Wall Street and the US to stop it by decoupling with China as early as possible. Arnab, I don't think there is any solution.
Decoupling economically first, I would say, Gaurav. Michael, Michael's
Absolutely.
responding. Michael,
Absolutely.
Michael, I say you're saying something, Michael.
I mean, if you think that war with China is inevitable, and in fact you want to hasten that outcome, as your guest apparently does, then he's in good luck, because the U.S. is in firm agreement with that and have oriented their military and defense policy in conjunction with that.
No, Michael, he's not saying that. Michael, one second. You got Gaurav. Michael, you got Gaurav completely wrong. What Gaurav was making a sardonic comment where Gaurav says, Michael, Gaurav says that if America is to defend its own interests, it must stop financing China to this great extent. And our expectation, therefore, as a country with a strong trading history, is that at this point of time, Peter, it is important for America to move its economic dependence from China to India. Or perhaps use India as a lever vis-a-vis China. That's not to put all its eggs in the Chinese basket. We would welcome that. What do you think, Professor Kuznick?
I think
I heard him say verbatim.
Okay, he wants to say something, but I've unnecessarily provoked Michael. I don't know why. I think he was agreeing with Gaurav there. Michael and
that war with China is inevitable. Therefore, the U.S. must prepare by decoupling economically with China and taking other measures. Well, if you view that as an inevitability, which would be a catastrophe, this would be World War III, essentially with nuclear armed powers.
One minute. Michael, let me tell you something about Gaurav. Gaurav is well recognized in India as one of our best known defense strategic affairs experts, but also as a well-known polemicist on these issues, who typically takes a line in order to provoke opinion. What Gaurav was saying to you is that you, as in America, needs to understand the big mistake it's making by funding China. Simple. China's economy is growing, America's is not. You have funded them for 40 years since Deng Xiaoping. You need to pull it back. That's all he's saying.
Another guest of yours mentioned how China was provocative or a threat to India because it is militarizing these installations around Tibet in the border region with India. That's what your guest said. Well, he said, take a look at what the U.S. is doing in Taiwan at the moment. They're militarizing Taiwan in the name of the U.S. force presence at an even greater rate, more rapid rate than anything China's doing in Tibet. They're having joint military exercises now that they're planning in Taiwan. U.S. Military is embedding into the Taiwanese armed forces.
You have to do that because you placed yourself in a situation where... My point to that is, my assertion to that is, and may I get Peter, you have placed yourself in a situation where you are funding your worst enemy and you're financing your biggest threat. And we as practical Indians are telling you to stop doing that. Shift your manufacturing, shift your technological dependencies, etc. Invest in India, work with India, change the dynamic. Over a decade, things will change. That's how we view it, at least from our perspective. I'd like Peter Kuznick to come in on that. Pete.
The United States has already been decoupling from China. That's U.S. policy. It goes beyond the chips manufacturing. It goes to almost all the important economic supply lines right now. So the question is, which way is the world going to go? Are we going to go toward cooperation and toward finding peaceful solutions, or are we going to go to a new Cold War? If we go to a new Cold War, then I think all bets are off. Then it becomes increasingly dangerous. Then the likelihood of World War III becomes that much greater. And so what I want to see is not the United States decoupling from China, although I would love to see the United States increase its trade with India, but that the United States is relying upon India largely for military production and some other kinds of high-tech production, because the United States sees its own with limitations right now. As the United States has financialized in recent decades, it's gotten away from even its own ability to produce the military weapons that it needs. Right now, for example, the Rand Corporation came out with a report about Ukraine called Avoiding a Long War. And it said that the United States is 4 years behind in its arms sales to Taiwan that it's promised. So the United States recognizes, in terms of its ability to provide the missiles, it wants India to provide the missiles. It wants India to produce the fighter jet engines. It wants India to produce other kinds of military technology. That's not the direction I'd like to see India develop. I want to see India use its high-tech capabilities, its skilled workforce, its educated population, its growing middle class, to make this a more peaceful world. The direction the world is going now is not toward peace. It's not toward collaboration. It's not toward communication. It's toward polarization. It's toward a new Cold War, a two-front Cold War for the U.S. against Russia and China. Now, India is not going to go along with the Cold War toward Russia, because even still today, although India used to get 2/3 of its weapons or more from Russia, it still gets close to 50%. So it's not going to break with that. 85% of India's weapons come from Russia. So it needs it for maintenance. It needs it for keeping those weapons and replacements. So it's not going to break with Russia in that way. But the United States thinks it can manipulate India. It's wrong.
No,
India
it can't.
is not going to fall for this. But the United States wants.
It absolutely
and you look
can't.
at the way the United States.
Absolutely can't. Professor, absolutely can't. We are very happy you're giving us the drone deals, but we are also giving you billions of dollars for it. There's no free lunch. If there's going to be an Indian astronaut at a space station, it's great for America, India space cooperation. There's a jet engine deal that's coming at a big price. The semiconductor investment is also part of the decoupling from China that America is doing. So we are fully aware that whatever you are doing is in your interest. It is not in our interest to be part of World War III, simply. And I think Prime Minister Modi's speech at the White House repeatedly stressed on quote-unquote global good and global peace. He sent out an underlying message. I'm not here with you to take part in World War III. I am here to bring about global peace and global good. Neutral India can be a global peacemaker. We are not going to take part in World War III with the enthusiasm that some sections of Americans would want. It's not going to happen. I think Prime Minister Modi is a statesman. He knows there is a Modi doctrine on foreign policy, which has led to a phenomenal shift in the world order. And I personally believe that Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy measures have been balancing for global peace. It would have been a very different world if India had taken sides this way or that post-Ukraine. Aishwarya Kapoor is at, I think, the East Room of the White House, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Biden will be delivering remarks and take questions from the press in what will be one of the most watched television events. Aishwarya, now how long has you've got the whole press behind you in the East Room? We know the talks are going on for long. I thought we'd have remarks about 10:30. It's already 10:56 by my clock. So nice, long, detailed exchange seems to be going on there.
Absolutely, Arnab. And a quick review which we got of around 10 minutes in the Oval Room with Prime Minister Modi and President Biden. The bonhomie, the body language which was being shared by the both, it is contrarian to all which was being said. And as far as the Indian interests are concerned, Prime Minister Modi has said not once, but even from the South Lawns today, that India is here to give a message of peace. We are here in the joint room of the press conference. That's the main door. I'm trying to zoom in, which is going to open in the next few minutes, and you're going to have Prime Minister Modi and President Biden coming out. Podium is set. Room is full. The front two rows have been left for dignitaries for both sides, India and the US. And then you have a full packed house of media, of the White House press corps, and the Indian delegation which has come to cover the Prime Minister's visit. And as you have been talking about the LCA Mark II engine aircraft, the $3 billion drone deal, the semiconductor technology transfer, apart from that, we are also being told by our sources, Arnab, that the insurance sector, the American side has pushed for opening the Indian market for the insurance sector. But once again, for that, the Indian government has said that you have to keep the interest of the Indian consumer foremost. So on all of those points, we are expecting an official confirmation within the next few minutes. Once again, these are the visuals from the East Room. You can see that's the main gate, the Marines guarding it from the other side. Within the next few minutes, expecting President Biden and Prime Minister Modi to be coming in. Stage is set. And it's a 45-minute delay or not. So it was expected that it would happen 45 minutes prior, but that's the bonhomie. The discussions are on, from the soft diplomacy, yoga diplomacy in New York to brass tacks in Washington. Prime Minister has a packed schedule, and we are expecting for a joint press briefing to begin right here within the next 10 to 12 minutes.
We just had thank you very much for that. We stay with those inside pictures from the East Room. Tweet from PMO India, which says Prime Minister Narendra Modi and POTUS Joe Biden held bilateral talks at the White House. They reviewed the entire spectrum of India-USA ties and discussed ways to further deepen the partnership. Saurabh is joining us. Saurabh is at the White House, as you can see there, Saurabh. Now, Saurabh, you've seen these engagements. They're usually by the clock, but this one is going further than was thought, at least half an hour longer or more than was scheduled.
So Arnab, what I'm gathering from my sources is that while the delegation level talks are on track, the one-on-one that lasted longer. As I was saying earlier on your broadcast, that contrary to many people who think that the working styles of both the leaders is very different, they have shared a rapport of sorts. And President Biden respects the worldview of Prime Minister Modi. Earlier too, he has quoted him a number of times, and today also during the talks, they've been having very frank conversation, and that means frank conversation on the state of the world, on the way ahead. And as you spoke about, there is going to be a Biden-Modi doctrine that will emerge. You will see post these talks, and they will obviously enunciate some part of it when they appear before the media. But you will see the work of a very elaborate joint statement that reflects the intensity of their conversation today, which has been built in the negotiations that we have seen. And as I was talking earlier, our top sources telling me that they've never seen a more congenial atmosphere when it came from negotiation from the Biden administration as well, because there was a direction right from the top. If you recall, he had sent Jake Sullivan to India to thrash out some of the last-minute wrinkles. And I can tell you that the joint statement will not only talk about India's role in the global arena, it will also etch out how India can benefit from the US and US can benefit from India. So it's a relationship of equals. I was seeing some of the observers on your show who were trying to parrot the same old agenda that many rags around have been saying, raking up issues which are obviously a blip on the radar. This is a much wider partnership today. It's a partnership. I can tell you that even if President Biden's mentioned something which is sensitive to India, they would have briefed Prime Minister Modi in advance to say that, listen, it's important for me to talk about it, but here is something we are telling you, because this is the level of comfort and trust that the two leaders have, the two governments have. So the whole paradigm has changed today. It's a relationship of equals. They know they cannot prescribe. Yeah. I asked a senior White House official. He told me categorically, there is no question of any coercion. There is no question of any prescription. We are having a frank and a candid chat as two friends do.
Yeah. All right. We are just a few minutes away from that joint address to the press by President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, as informed by Saurabh. It's the one-on-one which went on longer than the delegation level talks, and that really gives you an idea of the kind of intense conversation that must have happened between Prime Minister and the President. Do we still have Secretary Kawal Sebbal with us? I wanted to understand from him the expectations that we should have coming out of the dialogue. I think we have lost him there. I'll take that to Professor from DC. Professor, your expectations from the joint statement that's going to be there between the two leaderships in a while from now?
The joint statement will probably stress friendship, increased economic ties.
Before you start, I believe Professor, just hold on. I have to speak to the visuals. We are seeing some activity in the East Room. We are seeing Indian members of the Indian delegation coming out. I can see External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. I can see National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. I can see Prime Minister's OSD Communication Hiren Joshi. I can see, among others, Ambassador of India to the United States Taranjeet Singh Sandhu. I can also see MEA spokesperson Arindam Bagchi. And essentially what this means is the delegation level talks are over, and now I can see the US Ambassador to New Delhi, Eric Garcetti, and it seems the talks are over now. Anytime now the two leaders should be coming. Okay, quickly, Professor, back to you before we see the leaders coming in.
That recently Jake Sullivan and Lloyd Austin visited India in order to smooth over the differences and come to some agreements. Biden and Modi are likely to stress the positive, to say that this was a very friendly, congenial meeting, that they're going to talk about the things that they agreed upon. Closer economic ties, closer security ties, just ongoing friendship. It's going to be none of the issues that we've been raising I think, are going to be raised in this discussion right now. So they're going to talk about what they agree on. And what they agree on is positive. It's closer ties between the United States and India, increased friendship, increased collaboration, and a positive relationship moving forward. I think that the joint statement is going to be one on which there's going to be clearly looking at the positives that they were able to achieve. But we know that behind the scenes, there are very, very steep differences. The United States is not happy about India's response to the invasion of Ukraine. You know, the United States is not really happy about India's hesitation to form stronger defense ties to the United States. But there's a lot positive that's going to come out of this from both the Indian and the American perspectives, and that's what we're going to hear about.
Get in Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor.
I'm sure the kind of...
Let me get in Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor briefly. Abhishek, who is former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, now works as an international strategic advisor. He's in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, big day there, big joint statement. You've worked in Washington. You know Indian diplomacy well. What are your expectations of the joint statement?
Well, the whole day since the morning has been a very good day for US-India relations. I was there at the White House in the morning when both the leaders addressed the very big gathering. It was a historic gathering, and the address itself reflected the level of depth of relations. A lot of people told me from the White House that they have never seen such a large gathering at the White House ever in its history earlier. This was probably the biggest ever gathering that they have witnessed. And the leaders also, when they addressed the crowds, they had spoken very positively. And this positivity is going to be reflected in the joint statement. Both the countries are now looking forward to moving ahead jointly on the international arena to see how they can jointly deal with all the very serious problems which face the world today. So the joint communique will contain a lot of that outcome of the discussions, where they're going to be talking about how on different aspects, in the aspect of terrorism, they'll be working together.
I think we'd like to go across just 1 minute. I think we're waiting for, I'm just trying to see, sorry Ambassador Kapoor for butting in there. I just want to see there whether we are getting a live audio feed as well from the location. I don't think just yet. I think that's the camera from where Aishwarya is placed. Sorry, Ambassador Kapoor, I shall come back to you in just a bit. I want to just keep our viewers abreast with minute to minute what's going on. Quickly taking views from a lot of our panelists. Pathikrit is with us, very excited, geopolitical analyst. Pathikrit, exciting, but is this purely ceremonial, or is there a lot which remains unsaid on these occasions beyond the joint statement? What will you be looking for in the joint statement?
Arnab, there will always be certain things which will not be spoken about, and that's part of diplomacy. But I think a very important statement was made by the Prime Minister yesterday. He said that the relationship has overcome the hesitation of history, and that's a great thing, and that the barriers have been turned into bridges. So there are already major areas of convergence, whether you talk about public health, education, investments, commercial investments in the startup arena, or whether you talk about civil military, civil nuclear cooperation. I think the FDI from America, the exports to America has already gone up manifold. But yes, there are certain contentious issues that are there, and we cannot deny it. Of course, on the issue of NATO plus offer, or the issue of America expecting India to open up the dairy and the poultry market, certainly India cannot afford to do that, because crores of people back home in India are employed in those sectors. So the areas of divergence would always be there, or whether issues related to data security that India is bringing in. But I think today the focus would invariably be on the areas of convergence, and there are major areas of convergence. The fundamental thing which the Americans are focusing right now is that India is making giant strides in terms of developing the resilient supply chain to reduce the dependence on one of the key countries called China, which can be defined in certain way an adversary on the borderline. So when you talk about development of a resilient supply chain, you need finance for the development of resilience, you require technology investments, and you require security of critical minerals. I think these are the three sectors where I think a lot of work is definitely going to happen. Semiconductor is one major area. India is working towards development of a military-industrial complex. In terms of development of the military-industrial complex, that relationship is deepening from a client-vendor relationship to one where there is engagement. I mean, this is the first time there would be a transfer of technology, even if it is 60 to 70%. It's a great beginning in terms of India becoming a critical part of the supply chain of the global defense industry. So there
are there any, and okay, I think Michael Kugelman's also with us right now. Michael, can you hear me? This is Arnab here. Okay, he can't hear me yet. Are there any tricky issues, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor? Are there any tricky issues which have emerged? I mean, you've got a ringside view.
Of course, there are tricky issues
like what,
which are there between the two sides. The issue of human rights, which has been unfortunately, exaggerated by a lot of people here in Washington, D.C., is one of those issues. The issue of basically, the lack of total commitment, which is felt from both the sides, has been a little bit tricky, but that should have been overcome today, because after the bilateral talks and the body language, which we see, the chemistry, which we see between the two sides, and the warm reception that all of us got at the White House when we entered, the warmth of the welcome itself was overwhelming. So all those were very clear pointers. So they are going to see how to continue to deal with the issues. But what is most difficult for both the countries are the convergence of breaking America forces and the breaking India forces, and how these two countries are going to join together to deal with the challenges of these two forces. If you want me, I can outline those forces, but most of us know what those forces are. So that coalescing together to challenge US, to challenge India, and to challenge the US-India relations is one difficult job ahead for both the countries.
I think you're saying these issues should be sidestepped, but in a way you're also saying that America should realize it has its own issues internally. So we should join hands rather than fight each other on those issues. Prime Minister is there. I think we're getting a live feed. Let's cut straight. I think we saw a visual there of the Prime Minister arriving. Yes. Let's go across. Abhishek, over to you now. Okay, we just got a visual of the Prime Minister arriving at the hall. And everyone's standing up for that. I don't know if you have an audio feed yet. I think they're on stage over live. Audio.
It's a testament to the strong and enduring and thoroughly bipartisan support that exists all across the United States for the friendship and partnership between India and the United States that they're anxiously waiting to hear you up on Capitol Hill. A partnership that is among the most consequential in the world, that is stronger, closer, and more dynamic than any time in history. Mr. Prime Minister, we've met many times over the past few years, most recently in Hiroshima at the G7 summit, and each time I was struck by our ability to find new areas of cooperation. Together, we're unlocking the shared future of what I believe to be unlimited potential. And with this visit, we're demonstrating once more, and each time I was struck by our ability to find new areas of cooperation. Together, we're unlocking the shared future of what I believe to be unlimited potential. And with this visit, we're demonstrating once more how India and the United States are collaborating on nearly every human endeavor and delivering progress across the board. From designing new ways to diagnose and treat illnesses like cancer and diabetes, to collaborating on human spaceflight, including sending an Indian astronaut to the International Space Station in 2024, to accelerating the global clean energy transition and tackling the climate crisis we face, to harnessing our shared expertise on critical and emerging technologies like quantum computing and artificial intelligence, to ensuring they are not used as tools of misinformation and oppression. We are doubling down on our cooperation to secure our semiconductor supply chains, advancing Open RAN telecommunications networks, and growing our major defense partnership with the more joint exercises, more cooperation between our defense industries, and more consultation and coordination across all domains. Our economic relationship is booming. Trade between our countries has almost doubled over the past decade to more than $191 billion, supporting tens of thousands of good jobs in both India and the United States. Add to that, 1 million American jobs across 44 states will be supported by the purchase of more than 200 American-made Boeing aircraft by that Air India is announcing earlier this year. And with this visit, Indian firms are announcing more than $2 billion in new investments in manufacturing, solar in Colorado, steel in Ohio, and optic fiber in South Carolina, and much more. Further proof that America's manufacturing is back. We're expanding educational exchanges for our students, building on the record 125,000 student visas for Indians to study in the United States we issued last year, and opening new consulates that's going to make it easier for our people to travel, work, and collaborate together. On the issues that matter most and that will define the future, our nations look to one another, including on critical regional and global issues. And today, we also talked about our shared efforts to mitigate the humanitarian tragedies unleashed by Russia's brutal war in Ukraine and to defend the core principles of the UN Charter's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We discussed our work through the Quad and how India and the United States, together with Australia and Japan, can ensure the vital Indo-Pacific region remains free, open, prosperous, and secure. Through our new I2U2 grouping with Israel and the UAE, we're building regional connections to the Middle East and spurring science-based solutions to global challenges like food security and clean energy. And this year, under India's leadership of the G20, we're putting sustainable development at the center of the agenda. We're delivering meaningful action on low and middle-income nations, including multilateral development bank reform, debt relief, and building resilient and equitable health systems. The bottom line is simple. We want people everywhere to have the opportunity to live in dignity. And let me close with this. Indians and Americans are both peoples who innovate and create, turn obstacles into opportunities, who find strength in community and family, and who cherish freedom and celebrate the democratic values of universal human rights, which face challenges around the world and in each of our countries, but which remain so vital to the success of each of our nations. Press freedom, religious freedom, tolerance, diversity. India now is the most populous country in the world. It's a democracy. We understand that it is the brilliance and the backbone of our people, as diverse and talents and traditions that make us strong as a nation. It's democracies that do that. We see that so clearly here in the United States, where a vibrant Indian American community of more than 4 million strong contributes every single day to the writing of the future of our nation. Indian Americans of every background and faith, representing the full diversity of India, are pursuing their American dream while maintaining deep connections for their Indian heritage and families. That makes us all stronger. That is a cornerstone of this essential partnership between India and the United States. And that is why I know the friendship between our nations is only going to grow as we face the future together. Mr. Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Your Excellency,
President Biden,
दोनों देशों के
delegates of both countries, friends from the media, Namaskar. First of all, I thank President Biden for his warm words and for his positive views on India-America relations. Friends, today is a day that has special importance in the history of India-America relations. Our discussions today and the important decisions we have taken have added
हमारी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव ग्लोबल स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप में एक नया अध्याय जुड़ा है, एक नई दिशा और नई ऊर्जा मिली है। फ्रेंड्स, भारत अमेरिका की व्यापार और निवेश साझेदारी दोनों देशों के लिए ही नहीं बल्कि वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था के लिए भी महत्वपूर्ण है। आज अमेरिका भारत का सबसे बड़ा ट्रेड पार्टनर है। हमने निर्णय लिया है कि व्यापार से जुड़े लंबित मुद्दों को समाप्त कर नई शुरुआत की जाए। आईसेट यानी इनिशिएटिव फॉर क्रिटिकल एंड इमर्जिंग टेक्नोलॉजी हमारे तकनीकी सहयोग के महत्वपूर्ण फ्रेमवर्क के रूप में उभरा है। आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस, सेमीकंडक्टर्स, स्पेस, क्वांटम और टेलीकॉम जैसे क्षेत्रों में अपना सहयोग बढ़ाकर हम एक मजबूत और फ्यूचरिस्टिक साझेदारी की रचना कर रहे हैं। अमेरिका की माइक्रोन, गूगल तथा एप्लाइड मटेरियल जैसी कंपनियों द्वारा भारत में निवेश करने का निर्णय इस फ्यूचरिस्टिक साझेदारी का प्रतीक है। इस यात्रा के दौरान मुझे अमेरिका के कुछ अन्य सीईओज के साथ मुलाकात करने का भी अवसर मिला। उनके साथ हुई चर्चाओं में भी मैंने भारत के प्रति उत्साह और एक सकारात्मक सोच महसूस किया। हम दोनों सहमत हैं कि हमारी स्ट्रैटेजिक टेक्नोलॉजी पार्टनरशिप को सार्थक करने में गवर्नमेंट्स, बिजनेसेस और एकेडमिक इंस्टीट्यूशंस का साथ आना बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। क्लीन एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन में भारत और अमेरिका के साझे विजन को इंप्लीमेंट करने के लिए हमने कई महत्वपूर्ण इनिशिएटिव लिए हैं। इसमें ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन, विंड एनर्जी, बैटरी स्टोरेज, कार्बन कैप्चर जैसे क्षेत्र शामिल है। हमने यह भी निर्णय लिया कि वैश्विक अनिश्चितताओं के बीच भारत और अमेरिका ट्रस्टेड पार्टनर्स की तरह रिलायबल, सिक्योर और रेजिलिएंट ग्लोबल सप्लाई चेन और वैल्यू चेन तैयार करेंगे। भारत और अमेरिका के बीच करीबी रक्षा सहयोग हमारे आपसी विश्वास और साझा रणनीतिक प्राथमिकताओं का प्रतीक है। पुराने समय के बायर सेलर्स रिलेशनशिप पीछे छोड़कर आज हम ट्रांसफर ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, को डेवलपमेंट और को प्रोडक्शन की तरफ बढ़ चुके हैं। जनरल इलेक्ट्रिक द्वारा भारत में टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रांसफर के माध्यम से इंजन बनाने का निर्णय एक लैंडमार्क एग्रीमेंट है। इससे दोनों देशों में रोजगार के नए अवसर भी खुलेंगे। यह आने वाले समय में हमारे रक्षा सहयोग को एक नया स्वरूप देगा। इस सहयोग में दोनों देशों के रक्षा उद्योग और स्टार्टअप्स महत्वपूर्ण पार्टनर्स हैं। उन्हें आपस में जोड़ना हमारे डिफेंस इंडस्ट्रियल रोडमैप का मुख्य उद्देश्य है। स्पेस साइंस और टेक्नोलॉजी में हमारा गहरा और वर्षों पुराना सहयोग रहा है। आज हमने आर्टेमिस अकॉर्ड्स में शामिल होने का निर्णय लेकर हमारे स्पेस कोऑपरेशन में एक लंबी उड़ान भरी है। संक्षेप में कहूं तो भारत और अमेरिका की साझेदारी के लिए इवन स्काई इज नॉट द लिमिट। फ्रेंड्स, हमारे संबंधों का सबसे महत्वपूर्ण स्तंभ हमारे पीपल टू पीपल टाइज है। भारतीय मूल के 40 लाख से भी ज्यादा लोग आज अमेरिका की प्रगति में महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दे रहे हैं। आज सुबह व्हाइट हाउस में इतनी बड़ी संख्या में भारतीय लोगों की उपस्थिति इस बात का प्रमाण है कि इंडियन अमेरिकन्स हमारे संबंधों की असली ताकत है। इन संबंधों को और गहरा करने के लिए हम अमेरिका द्वारा बेंगलुरु और अहमदाबाद में कॉन्सुलेट्स खोलने के निर्णय का स्वागत करते हैं। उसी तरह सिएटल में भारत का नया कॉन्सुलेट खोलेंगे। फ्रेंड्स, आज की बैठक में हमने कई क्षेत्रीय एवं वैश्विक मुद्दों पर चर्चा की। इंडो पैसिफिक में शांति और सुरक्षा यह हमारी साझा प्राथमिकता है। हम एकमत है कि इस क्षेत्र का विकास और सफलता पूरे विश्व के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है। हमने क्वाड पार्टनरशिप के साथ मिलकर इस क्षेत्र के सभी देशों के साथ अपना समन्वय बढ़ाने पर विचार साझा किए। आतंकवाद और कट्टरवाद के खिलाफ लड़ाई में भारत और अमेरिका कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर चल रहे हैं। हम सहमत हैं कि क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म को समाप्त करने के लिए ठोस कार्रवाई आवश्यक है। कोविड महामारी और यूक्रेन संघर्ष से ग्लोबल साउथ के देश विशेष रूप से पीड़ित हुए हैं। हमारा मत है कि इन समस्याओं के समाधान के लिए सभी देशों का एकजुट होना अनिवार्य है। यूक्रेन के घटनाक्रम के शुरुआत से ही भारत ने डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी के माध्यम से इस विवाद को सुलझाने पर जोर दिया है। हम शांति की बहाली के लिए हर संभव योगदान देने के लिए पूरी तरह से तैयार है। भारत की G20 की अध्यक्षता में हम वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर उस पर बल दे रहे हैं। ग्लोबल साउथ की प्राथमिकताओं को आवाज दे रहे हैं। मैं राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन का धन्यवाद करता हूं कि उन्होंने अफ्रीका को G20 का पूर्ण सदस्य बनाने के मेरे प्रस्ताव पर समर्थन जताया है। फ्रेंड्स, हमारे सभी साझे प्रयासों का मूल मंत्र है लोकतंत्र और लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों तथा व्यवस्थाओं को सशक्त करना। विश्व के दो सबसे बड़े लोकतंत्र भारत और अमेरिका मिलकर विश्व शांति, स्थिरता, समृद्धि में महत्वपूर्ण सहयोग दे सकते हैं। मुझे विश्वास है कि इन मूल्यों के आधार पर हम दोनों देशों के लोगों की ही नहीं बल्कि पूरे विश्व की अपेक्षाओं और आकांक्षाओं को पूरा कर सकेंगे। राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन, आज की उपयोगी चर्चा के लिए मैं आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं। इस वर्ष G20 समिट के दौरान आपका भारत में स्वागत करने के लिए भारत और मैं स्वयं भी बहुत ही उत्सुक है। और जैसा राष्ट्रपति जी ने कहा, हम लोगों को मुझे जाना है बाद में कांग्रेस को एड्रेस करने के लिए, और इसलिए ज्यादा अधिक समय न लेते हुए मैं मेरी बात को विराम देता हूं। मैं फिर एक बार राष्ट्रपति का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं।
Well, the Congress is actually waiting to, and anxiously waiting to hear you. I'm told there are two questioners, Sabrina from the Wall Street Journal and Kumar from the Trust of India. And Sabrina, you first.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for the Prime Minister, but first a two-part question for you. Your comments at a fundraiser this week appear to be the first time in recent memory that a sitting U.S. president has called a Chinese leader a dictator. Did those comments about President Xi undermine or complicate the progress your administration has made in maintaining a relationship with China? And secondly, on India, as you raise these broader issues of human rights and democracy, what is your message to those, including some members of your own party, who say that your administration is overlooking the targeting of religious minorities and crackdown on dissent in Prime Minister Modi's country?
The answer to your first question is no. When we're talking to our allies and partners around the world, including India, we let the idea of my choosing and avoiding saying what I think is the facts with regard to the relationship with India, with China, is just not something I'm going to change very much. I think I believe that, and I've said this for some time, that the hysteria about the relationship with China is collapsing and moving, et cetera, et cetera. We had an incident that caused some confusion, you might say. But the Secretary Blinken had a great trip to China. I expect to be meeting with President Xi sometime in the future, in the near term, and I don't think it's had any real consequence. And what was your second question?
So as you raise these broader issues of human rights and democracy, what is your message to those, including some members of your own party, who believe that your administration is overlooking the targeting of religious minorities and a crackdown on dissent in India?
Well, look, the Prime Minister and I had a good discussion about democratic values, and that's the nature of our relationship. We're straightforward with each other, and we respect each other. One of the fundamental reasons that I believe the U.S.-China relationship is not in the space it is in the U.S.-Indian relationship is that there's an overwhelming respect for each other because we're both democracies. And it's a common democratic character of both our countries and our people, our diversity, our culture, our open, tolerant, robust debate. And I believe that we believe in the dignity of every citizen. And it is in America's DNA, and I believe in India's DNA, that the whole world has a stake in our success, both of us, in maintaining our democracies, makes us appealing partners, and enables us to expand democratic institutions around the world. And I believe this, and I still believe this.
Mr. Prime Minister, India has long prided itself as the world's largest democracy, but there are many human rights groups who say that your government has discriminated against religious minorities and sought to silence its critics. As you stand here in the east room of the White House, where so many world leaders have made commitments to protecting democracy, what steps are you and your government willing to take to improve the rights of Muslims and other minorities in your country and to uphold free speech?
मुझे आश्चर्य हो रहा है कि आप कह रहे हैं कि लोग कहते हैं नहीं, भारत डेमोक्रेसी है। और जैसा राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन ने कहा, भारत और अमेरिका दोनों के डीएनए में लोकतंत्र है। लोकतंत्र हमारा स्पिरिट है, लोकतंत्र हमारी रगों में है, लोकतंत्र को हम जीते हैं और हमारे पूर्वजों ने उसको शब्दों में ढाला है संविधान के रूप में, और हमारी सरकार लोकतंत्र के मूलभूत मूल्यों को आधार लेकर के बने हुए संविधान के आधार पर चलती है। और हमारा संविधान और हमारी सरकार, और हमने सिद्ध किया है डेमोक्रेसी कैन डिलीवर, और जब मैं डिलीवर कहता हूं तब कास्ट, क्रीड, रिलीजन, जेंडर, किसी भी भेदभाव को वहां जगह नहीं होती है। और जब हम लोकतंत्र की बात करते हैं तब अगर ह्यूमन वैल्यूज नहीं है, ह्यूमैनिटी नहीं है, ह्यूमन राइट्स नहीं है, फिर तो वो डेमोक्रेसी है ही नहीं। और इसलिए जब आप डेमोक्रेसी कहते हैं, जब डेमोक्रेसी को स्वीकार करते हैं और जब हम डेमोक्रेसी को लेकर के जीते हैं, तब डिस्क्रिमिनेशन का कोई सवाल ही नहीं उठता है। और इसलिए भारत सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास, सबका प्रयास, उन मूलभूत सिद्धांतों को लेकर के, और इसलिए हम चलते हैं। भारत में सरकार के जो बेनिफिट्स हैं वो एक्सेस टू ऑल है, जो भी उसके हकदार हैं उन सबको मिलते हैं। इसलिए भारत के लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों में कोई भेदभाव नहीं है, न धर्म के आधार पर, न जाति के आधार पर, न उम्र के आधार पर, न भूभाग के आधार पर।
Kumar.
Yeah, thanks a lot, sir. Sir, my question is on the issue of climate change. Both countries have spoken strongly about the need to tackle the climate change, but there is a view.
I'm sorry.
Both countries have spoken about the challenge of climate change, but there is a view that ambitious targets are set, but implementation is found often lacking. And there is also a criticism of lack of technological transfer, financial transfer from the developed countries to the developing nations. How do you both leaders see the way ahead on this pressing issue?
Well, first of all, I think it is the existential threat to humanity, climate change. It's the most serious problem we face as human beings. We have to keep it below 1.5 degrees Celsius. We've made enormous progress here in the United States on dealing with this issue by doing three things. Number one, by insisting that we move every one of our industries into a position where they can take advantage of cheaper and more extensive and more available renewable energy, whether it's solar or wind or hydrogen and green hydrogen. There's a whole range of things we've been working on. In addition to that, we find ourselves in a position that what we've done is that we have significantly reduced for example, I made a commitment that we are going to make sure that by 2030, 30% of all our land and sea and oceans were in conservation, could not be developed. We're well on our way to doing that, and that's also absorbing carbon from the air as a consequence of that because of the conservation. We are in a position as well that we have provided for significant increase in funding for a whole range of issues, but not just for the United States, but for the rest of the world. For example, we're working with the G7 to provide for infrastructure work for dealing with global warming in the continent of Africa. In Angola, building the largest solar project, moving ourselves, having railway to go all the way across the southern from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean in Africa, to be able to transport and do it cheaper and do it with less, how can I say it, less carbon emissions. We're trying to work with other countries to maintain their carbon sinks so they don't have to develop them like we did in causing pollution, and we're trying to figure out how to work out to pay them not to develop certain areas like the Amazon and Brazil. But there's a lot of technology that's available that we're sharing and we share with one another. We've learned how to do solar energy, which is considerably cheaper than it is for fossil fuels. The same way dealing with not just solar, but dealing with wind. And so there's a lot of technology that we've developed, and we're well on our way, I think, to meeting the commitment we made that we made in Paris. And we're prepared to share all of that with India, that has a desire to do the same.
एक्सेलेंसी, आपने सही कहा। जहां तक भारत का सवाल है, एनवायरमेंट, क्लाइमेट, ये हमारे सांस्कृतिक परंपरा में अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण स्थान है उसका। हमारे लिए एनवायरमेंट ये आर्टिकल ऑफ फेथ है। ये कन्वीनियंस के कारण करने का हमारा काम नहीं है, हम ये मानते हैं। हम एक्सप्लॉयटेशन ऑफ नेचर में विश्वास नहीं करते हैं। पूरे सृष्टि को चलाने के लिए मिल्किंग ऑफ नेचर तक तो चल सकता है, लेकिन एक्सप्लॉयटेशन ऑफ नेचर नहीं चल सकता है। हम इस पक्ष में रहे हैं और उसी के मूल पर आधार पर भारत अपने लिए करता है, इतना ही नहीं, हम कुछ ग्लोबल इनिशिएटिव भी ले रहे हैं। आपको मालूम है, G20 देशों ने पेरिस में जो प्रॉमिस किया था, सभी G20 देशों में अकेला हिंदुस्तान है जिसने पेरिस में जो प्रॉमिस किए थे वो सारे प्रॉमिस पूरे किए हैं। इतना ही नहीं, सोलर एनर्जी के क्षेत्र में हमने ग्लासगो में रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी के क्षेत्र में 500 गीगावाट का टारगेट रखा है। हमने 2030 तक भारत की रेलवे का नेट जीरो का लक्ष्य रखा है। और भारत की रेलवे कहने के बाद आपको उसका स्केल पता होना चाहिए। भारत की रेलवे का मतलब है कि हर दिन मेरे यहां रेल के डिब्बे में पूरा ऑस्ट्रेलिया होता है। इतना बड़ा मेरा देश है और वहां मैं 2030 तक रेलवे को नेट जीरो लेकर के चल रहा हूं। उसी प्रकार से जो हमने सोलर एनर्जी के टारगेट तय किए थे, हमने इथेनॉल के टारगेट तय किए थे 10% का, वो समय से पहले पूरा कर दिया। हम 20% इथेनॉल ब्लेंडिंग की दिशा में आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। हम ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन को इनिशिएट कर रहे हैं और भारत ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन हब बने, उस दिशा में हम काम कर रहे हैं। हमने दुनिया के लिए इंटरनेशनल सोलर अलायंस उसका हमने लॉन्च किया और आज दुनिया के कई देश उसमें भारत के साथ मिलकर के आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। हमने जो आइलैंड कंट्रीज है उनको स्पेशली सोलार के क्षेत्र में मदद करके उनको एक नया विश्वास दिया है कि हम आपकी कठिनाइयों में आपके साथ हैं। भावी किसी भी संकट के लिए हम आपकी चुनौती को पार करने के लिए हमारी जिम्मेवारियां निभाएंगे, आपको भी मदद करेंगे। हम वो देश हैं जिसने एक और नया क्षेत्र हाथ लिया है। हम देख रहे हैं कि नेचुरल कैलेमिटी के कारण आज मनुष्य मृत्यु की चर्चा तो होती है, लेकिन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का इतना नुकसान होता है जो 50-50 साल तक भरपाई नहीं हो सकता। और इसलिए ये जो क्लाइमेट चेंज के कारण जिस प्रकार का संकट आ रहा है, तो ऐसा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बनना चाहिए जिसमें रेजिलियंस हो। और इसके लिए CDRI हमने एक ग्लोबल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को जन्म दिया है। और आपको पता होगा, मैंने ग्लासगो के अंदर एक विषय रखा है दुनिया के सामने, और जिसको पिछले दिनों UN सेक्रेटरी जनरल और मैंने उसको लॉन्च किया है, वो है मिशन लाइफ। और जब मैं लाइफ कहता हूं तब लाइफ स्टाइल फॉर एनवायरमेंट। हर इंडिविजुअल को प्रो क्लाइमेट, प्रो एनवायरमेंट अपना जीवन जीने का तरीका डेवलप करना होगा। इतने बड़े संकट के लिए उस दिशा में भी हम काम कर रहे हैं। और मुझे विश्वास है कि भारत ने जो आज इन क्षेत्रों में काम शुरू किया है, इसलिए नहीं कि भारत ने दुनिया के एनवायरमेंट को बुरा किया है, लेकिन हम इसलिए कर रहे हैं कि हमारी भावी पीढ़ी की हमें चिंता है। हम हमारी भावी पीढ़ी को ऐसा विश्व नहीं दे सकते हैं कि जिसके लिए उसके लिए जीना कठिन हो जाए। और इसलिए एक ग्लोबल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी के रूप में भारत ने खुद ने कुछ बुरा नहीं किया है तो भी अच्छा करने में, योगदान देने में हम अग्रिम भूमिका निभा रहे हैं और हम आगे भी निभा रहेंगे। जहां तक समृद्ध देश हैं, लगातार चर्चा रही है, टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रांसफर हो, फाइनेंशियल मदद हो, और धीरे धीरे विश्व भी मन बना रहा है कि जो देश इसमें करना चाहते हैं उनको टेक्नोलॉजी की मदद मिले, उनको फाइनेंशियल मदद मिले। हम प्रतीक्षा कर रहे हैं कि जितना जल्दी इस विषय में आगे बढ़ेंगे, दुनिया को इस संकट से हम जल्दी से मुक्त कर पाएंगे। धन्यवाद।
Let me add one thing to that. We have caused damage in the United States the way we developed over the last 300 years. And that's why I was able to convince my colleagues in the Congress to pass legislation, the largest climate fund ever in American and the world history, $369 billion. $369 billion to deal with the climate crisis. And we're doing it extensively now, and I think you're going to see significant progress. Thank you all very, very much.
Okay, that's okay. Let's get quick responses till we get the next live feed in. So let me get a first take from you. I love the pincer-like response there, Abhishek, from Prime Minister on that question on democracy, where he said, I'm surprised, he said, that you are talking about India being a democracy, or when the fact is that it is a democracy. I love the way the Prime Minister refused to get lectured, and that response from the White House stage, where he made it very clear that our benefits are for all. Our government does not discriminate on benefits of democracy, access to all, not on caste, creed, gender. You know, so it was a factual response to this fake narrative, Abhishek. I think that's that was a very sharp response when he spoke directly to the Wall Street reporter.
Oh, absolutely, minus any rhetoric, and on its head, he said that people talk. It's not about people talking, it's about we living it. We live democracy, it's in our DNA. Our ancestors have ingrained in us, and it's enshrined, most importantly, in the Constitution, which does not differentiate between any citizen based on caste, creed, religion, gender, age, and geography. I think Prime Minister was very confident. And remember, Arnab, because it was a Wall Street Journal reporter, I quote from the interview that Prime Minister gave to Wall Street Journal, in which he said that this is what I am, this is what my country is, and I present to you what I am and what my country is. Exact words, Arnab. And that really was what Prime Minister did in that press conference. Absolutely sure and confident about himself. He, of course, could have democracy question from many schemes of his government.
No, on the same democracy question, Gaurav, the US president refused to get drawn. I mean, there was this attempt at drawing him into drawing one word from Biden, one word which will be seen to be critical of India. That one word did not come. He just clearly said we have an overwhelming respect for each other because we are democracies. That's not our relationship with China. And he said the same thing that Modi said. He said it is in our DNA. It is in both our DNAs. That's the exact word that Biden said. So for all the lobby looking for that one little word out of which you can draw a headline and write 25 editorials after that, it's not going to happen.
Nothing.
No, absolutely, Arnab. One more thing, I was pleasantly surprised to see how well Prime Minister Modi, of course, he does it and he's a master at that. But the way he answered that question, he gave a historical perspective, like Abhishek very rightly said. He gave a constitutional perspective, and he spoke. I think he was also speaking about so many welfare schemes which go from house to house in India and do not discriminate on the basis of caste or religion, creed, skin color, geography, or whatever. And I think he was, and yes, Arnab, to what you have said, both the leaders complimented each other's statements, and Bernie Sanders and his ilk, who were looking for that one word out of place, because they were sending petition after petition to Joe Biden, 65 odd lawmakers and pressure groups saying that you must hold Modi to account and you must ask Modi all these questions. All that has now turned to dust.
Ambassador Kapoor.
Now it does not matter.
Ambassador Kapoor, and then I'll come to you. Dr. Sampath Shivangi has been waiting a long time. So first, let me go to Dr. Sampath Shivangi. You heard the whole press conference there, and you've been a past advisor to President Bush and President Trump. You've worked closely with administrations in different capacities, of course. Dr. Shivangi, what did you make of the overall presentation at that joint statement, sir?
Thank you, Arnab. It's my great pleasure to be with you. I've been watching you for maybe dozens of years, and thank you for the opportunity. I think Prime Minister did an outstanding job. I have no words beyond that. I think he even swept Biden on his remarks about India's democracy, India's tolerance, India's treating the minorities. I think he went on positively on every aspect. I think those who had little doubt, actually Biden was very, very supportive of Prime Minister. I thought maybe he will waver because there were 72 congressmen, women, and senators who wrote against, almost against India, saying that India is not following the international standards of treating minorities. But I think he proved wrong. Biden stood by India, stood by the Prime Minister. I applaud him. I'm very proud of him. Even now, I'm a Republican. Today, I have all the respect for Biden for standing for what is right, not because India is wrong or right. He stood for the right. India is always been right. I'm here for 50 years. I've been through political turmoil for the last 15 years. I think this was the best ever speech by Prime Minister. And Mr. Biden was very subdued, and he supported India. I welcome that.
Absolutely, Dr. Shivangi. It's also a pleasure to have you on the show. Ambassador Kapoor, I think the big takeaway for me was that the focus continued to be on broad spectrum collaboration, new technological partnerships, global consequences. On Ukraine, I think Prime Minister said that we need to work for peace. We need to engage in dialogue. I'll help in any dialogue to help. But I think it was also significant that Prime Minister Modi said and actually announced that the US President supports India's very, very strong request to include the African Union as a member, full-fledged member of the G20. That also elevates Prime Minister Modi's stature because he's not speaking only on behalf of India, but virtually the global South. So I'm sure you looked at it sharply. You spoke about the pressure building on Biden, by certain lobbies earlier in your first response. Your takeaway?
Yes.
Well, Arnab, you are absolutely right. The respect which India has in Africa, in the third world, has been seen by me firsthand. I've worked a lot in the developing countries and the least developed countries of the world. So for India to champion the cause is nothing new. We have been, the first Asian Relations Conference was held before India's independence in 1947, March, April, in India, when 38 countries participated, including Tibet, participated as an independent entity. At that Asia Relations Conference, India had proposed that the next conference should be of an Afro-Asian Relations Conference, which was started as an Afro-Asian Relations Conference and ended up at the same conference becoming the non-aligned movement. So India has been championing the cause of the third world for a very long time. And in G20, it has been our very stated purpose that we will continue to do that. So for him to enunciate that, and as the chairman, India will have a lot of leeway to move on that. So if it happens, it will again be seen as one of the major steps which India has taken. What I would also like to point out, Arnab, and thank you for the great work that Republic does in bringing the true facts before the people. There is a very false narrative which is being propagated by a lot of lobbies here and all the sort of people who want to create this false narrative, which is absolutely not true on the ground, about discrimination in India, about human rights violations, about the minorities not getting the true justice, about so many other things which are way out false. Now for President Biden to call out that narrative in such strong terms is absolutely a very phenomenal step forward in our relations, because earlier we would see that presidents and senators and others would buckle under the threat. What Dr. Shivangi has mentioned about 70 odd congressmen and some senators signing that document, I think it's a very useless piece of work, and none of the Republicans have signed it. What is required is for a counter narrative to be built up which states the true facts. Even in India, we have seen that some civil servants try to put out false narratives about the government, and the Forum of Ambassadors, of which I am a part, immediately puts out a rebuttal, and the whole thing dies down. So similarly, in the Western world now, this false narrative needs to be challenged and struck down. Thank you, Arnab.
I totally agree. I think President Biden's decision, Gaurav, not to fall prey to that, to resist it, will be noticed. It is, I would say, it is a hammer blow to this lobby today. It's a hammer blow because question is put. He just, not only he didn't dodge it, Gaurav. He said we have our shared values and we respect India because it is such a large and effective democracy. It is in our DNA. So far from criticism, he ended up lavishing fulsome praise on Indian democracy. I think it's a hammer blow to this democracy is dying brigade.
No, absolutely, Arnab. What happened was that while Joe Biden was very clear on his relationship with India and with Prime Minister Modi, now this so-called brigade has taken up Barack Obama's statement and are playing it all over the internet. Opposition parties in India, everybody, you know, the Bernie Sanders brigade in the United States. So they're saying that, look what Obama said. Now Obama is irrelevant. And as a private citizen, he has every right to say whatever he wishes to say. But when Obama was welcoming Prime Minister Modi to the White House, he said nothing like that. Now, as a private citizen, he can say whatever he wishes. It's not American policy any longer. That's all I have to say, Arnab.
Well, I mean, I don't even take... my two-bit on that is that both Barack Obama... My two-bit on that, Abhishek, is that both Barack Obama and Christian Amanpour are irrelevant. So what is relevant is what happened in the White House today. Abhishek.
Yeah, absolutely. And for President Biden, who was deputy to Barack Obama, to be ignoring completely what Obama said and not to get carried away or get influenced by his former boss, I think is a strong message about the intent and objectives of the American establishment when it comes to their engagement with India and with Prime Minister Modi.
No, absolutely true. Absolutely true. I think it was plain straight talk, Pathikrit. You know, all those pseudos hoping to have one salacious headline to tweet from Biden's comments looking for that one three-word quote did not get it.
No, first of all, President Biden doesn't need President Biden doesn't need any Wall Street Journal's armchair journalist to tell him the condition of India, because they have the embassy here to tell the manner in which India has evolved as the fifth largest economy, as a bright spot in a dark horizon, could not have happened if India had been discriminatory. If India had been discriminatory, it would not have been able to tackle the COVID the manner in which it has tackled. I work in these areas, Arnab. I know the manner in which, in case of Mudra loan, in case of Ayushman Bharat, in case of Jan Dhan Yojana, in case of vaccine, most of the time the beneficiaries' primary focus has been on the minorities, to make sure from door to door it has gone, to make sure that everybody gets benefited. Is it possible, Arnab, that India would have emerged victorious out of this COVID, calamity if India had been discriminatory? So I think that State Department knows, and today it was time they called the bluff. And I'm very happy President Biden took that initiative to actually ignore. He absolutely ignored that armchair journalist who was looking for something. Secondly, I also appreciate, Arnab, the statement by President Biden that he admitted for the first time, it was an American president admitting that yes, America and the West did damage the climate, because for a long time these green barriers were being imposed on in India to say that India is the responsible country for all the problems in climate. The manner in which Prime Minister talked about the initiative that has been taken by India in terms of International Solar Alliance, in terms of ethanol blending, in terms of lifestyle for environment, in terms of national green hydrogen mission, in terms of having the third largest installed capacity of renewable energy today. And yet there are challenges. We have to take care of the aspiration of 140 crore people. We cannot do away with coal right away. It would have tremendous impact on the grid stability. So I saw tremendous level of maturity from both the Prime Minister and President, and I'm thankful, and my respect for President Biden has gone up today.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Shivangi wanted to add something there. Dr. Shivangi.
Yeah, I think I mentioned I've been very active in politics in the United States. I've been 5 times national delegate for Republican Party presidents, and I worked for 3 presidents in the country. But today was the unique day for history of India and US. I was there as one of the spectators in the White House when Modi ji and President Biden. I wouldn't say more than 5,000 to 10,000 Indian Americans standing beside him, calling Modi and Mr. Biden's name. I think it was a unique experience, at least in my life. I have never seen every state in the Washington has been decorated with US and Indian flags. I mean, how Indian would be proud and so happy that India is shining. It's a real example how India can do much more. India is now 4th largest or 5th largest economy in the world. With the help of Biden, with all the technology being transferred to India, I think India is not too far being the 2nd or 3rd largest economy or industrial power in the world. I welcome Mr. Modi's arrival. He did an outstanding job. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Shivangi, and all of you for staying there. And as Abhishek, I want to make one point. If anybody felt today that Biden was in a mood to avoid straight talk, it's not true, because from that same stage, Abhishek, Biden refused to back off from calling Xi Jinping a dictator. So it was clear that there is a firm position against China. He said, we are democracies, we respect each other, and that is the reason, that is what is missing in the relationship with China. So he made a clear choice out there. And he made it clear that America has taken a line, despite the Blinken meeting with Xi, that Biden stands by calling Xi Jinping a dictator.
Yes, he did.
I think that was, so he was in straight talk mode out there. There's no overall sidestepping. It's a choice America has made. Abhishek.
He actually underscored, Arnab, by adding that the kind of straightforward conversation we have with mutual respect with India, we don't have with China. So whenever I meet with Xi Jinping, I'll talk to him about that. Does not mean we have sort of sabotaged or derailed the dialogue that was having. But then I stand by what I said. There is no question of backing off. So I think he was taking a very tough position and doubling down on what he said about Xi Jinping.
I have a lot of our viewers want to watch the entire clip of Prime Minister Modi's interventions. So I thank our round of guests. And as we are preparing for the run-up to the US Congress speech, here's a clip of Prime Minister Modi's, comments at the White House.
Your Excellency, राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन, दोनों देशों के डेलीगेट्स, मीडिया के साथियों, नमस्कार। सबसे पहले मैं राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन को उनके मित्रतापूर्ण शब्दों और भारत अमेरिका संबंधों के बारे में उनके सकारात्मक विचारों के लिए धन्यवाद देता हूं। फ्रेंड्स, आज का दिन भारत और अमेरिका के संबंधों के इतिहास में एक विशेष महत्व रखता है। आज की हमारी चर्चा और हमारे द्वारा लिए गए महत्वपूर्ण निर्णयों से हमारी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव ग्लोबल स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप में एक नया अध्याय जुड़ा है। एक नई दिशा और नई ऊर्जा मिली है। फ्रेंड्स, भारत अमेरिका की व्यापार और निवेश साझेदारी दोनों देशों के लिए ही नहीं बल्कि वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था के लिए भी महत्वपूर्ण है। आज अमेरिका भारत का सबसे बड़ा ट्रेड पार्टनर है। हमने निर्णय लिया है कि व्यापार से जुड़े लंबित मुद्दों को समाप्त कर नई शुरुआत की जाए। आईसेट यानी इनिशिएटिव फॉर क्रिटिकल एंड इमर्जिंग टेक्नोलॉजी हमारे तकनीकी सहयोग के महत्वपूर्ण फ्रेमवर्क के रूप में उभरा है। आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस, सेमीकंडक्टर्स, स्पेस, क्वांटम और टेलीकॉम जैसे क्षेत्रों में अपना सहयोग बढ़ाकर हम एक मजबूत और फ्यूचरिस्टिक साझेदारी की रचना कर रहे हैं। अमेरिका की माइक्रॉन, गूगल तथा एप्लाइड मटेरियल जैसी कंपनियों द्वारा भारत में निवेश करने का निर्णय इस फ्यूचरिस्टिक साझेदारी का प्रतीक है। इस यात्रा के दौरान मुझे अमेरिका के कुछ अन्य सीईओज के साथ मुलाकात करने का भी अवसर मिला। उनके साथ हुई चर्चाओं में भी मैंने भारत के प्रति उत्साह और एक सकारात्मक सोच महसूस किया। हम दोनों सहमत हैं कि हमारी स्ट्रैटेजिक टेक्नोलॉजी पार्टनरशिप को सार्थक करने में गवर्नमेंट्स, बिजनेसेस और एकेडमिक इंस्टीट्यूशंस का साथ आना बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। क्लीन एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन में भारत और अमेरिका के साझे विजन को इम्प्लीमेंट करने के लिए हमने कई महत्वपूर्ण इनिशिएटिव लिए हैं। इसमें ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन, विंड एनर्जी, बैटरी स्टोरेज, कार्बन कैप्चर जैसे क्षेत्र शामिल है। हमने यह भी निर्णय लिया कि वैश्विक अनिश्चितताओं के बीच भारत और अमेरिका ट्रस्टेड पार्टनर्स की तरह रिलायबल, सिक्योर और रेजिलिएंट ग्लोबल सप्लाई चेन और वैल्यू चेन तैयार करेंगे। भारत और अमेरिका के बीच करीबी रक्षा सहयोग हमारे आपसी विश्वास और साझा रणनीतिक प्राथमिकताओं का प्रतीक है। पुराने समय के बायर सेलर्स रिलेशनशिप पीछे छोड़कर आज हम ट्रांसफर ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, को डेवलपमेंट और को प्रोडक्शन की तरफ बढ़ चुके हैं। जनरल इलेक्ट्रिक द्वारा भारत में टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रांसफर के माध्यम से इंजन बनाने का निर्णय एक लैंडमार्क एग्रीमेंट है। इससे दोनों देशों में रोजगार के नए अवसर भी खुलेंगे। यह आने वाले समय में हमारे रक्षा सहयोग को एक नया स्वरूप देगा। इस सहयोग में दोनों देशों के रक्षा उद्योग और स्टार्टअप्स महत्वपूर्ण पार्टनर्स हैं। उन्हें आपस में जोड़ना हमारे डिफेंस इंडस्ट्रियल रोडमैप का मुख्य उद्देश्य है। स्पेस साइंस और टेक्नोलॉजी में हमारा गहरा और वर्षों पुराना सहयोग रहा है। आज हमने आर्टेमिस अकॉर्ड्स में शामिल होने का निर्णय लेकर हमारे स्पेस कोऑपरेशन में एक लंबी उड़ान भरी है। संक्षेप में कहूं तो भारत और अमेरिका की साझेदारी के लिए इवन स्काई इज नॉट द लिमिट। फ्रेंड्स, हमारे संबंधों का सबसे महत्वपूर्ण स्तंभ हमारे पीपल टू पीपल टाइज है। भारतीय मूल के 40 लाख से भी ज्यादा लोग आज अमेरिका की प्रगति में महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दे रहे हैं। आज सुबह व्हाइट हाउस में इतनी बड़ी संख्या में भारतीय लोगों की उपस्थिति इस बात का प्रमाण है कि इंडियन अमेरिकन्स हमारे संबंधों की असली ताकत है। इन संबंधों को और गहरा करने के लिए हम अमेरिका द्वारा बेंगलुरु और अहमदाबाद में कॉन्सुलेट्स खोलने के निर्णय का स्वागत करते हैं। उसी तरह सिएटल में भारत का नया कॉन्सुलेट खोलेंगे। फ्रेंड्स, आज की बैठक में हमने कई क्षेत्रीय एवं वैश्विक मुद्दों पर चर्चा की। इंडो पैसिफिक में शांति और सुरक्षा यह हमारी साझा प्राथमिकता है। हम एकमत हैं कि इस क्षेत्र का विकास और सफलता पूरे विश्व के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है। हमने क्वाड पार्टनरशिप के साथ मिलकर इस क्षेत्र के सभी देशों के साथ अपना समन्वय बढ़ाने पर विचार साझा किए। आतंकवाद और कट्टरवाद के खिलाफ लड़ाई में भारत और अमेरिका कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर चल रहे हैं। हम सहमत हैं कि क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म को समाप्त करने के लिए ठोस कार्रवाई आवश्यक है। कोविड महामारी और यूक्रेन संघर्ष से ग्लोबल साउथ के देश विशेष रूप से पीड़ित हुए हैं। हमारा मत है कि इन समस्याओं के समाधान के लिए सभी देशों का एकजुट होना अनिवार्य है। यूक्रेन के घटनाक्रम के शुरुआत से ही भारत ने डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी के माध्यम से इस विवाद को सुलझाने पर जोर दिया है। हम शांति की बहाली के लिए हर संभव योगदान देने के लिए पूरी तरह से तैयार है। भारत की G20 की अध्यक्षता में हम वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर उस पर बल दे रहे हैं। ग्लोबल साउथ की प्राथमिकताओं को आवाज दे रहे हैं। मैं राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन का धन्यवाद करता हूं कि उन्होंने अफ्रीका को G20 का पूर्ण सदस्य बनाने के मेरे प्रस्ताव पर समर्थन जताया है। फ्रेंड्स, हमारे सभी साझे प्रयासों का मूल मंत्र है लोकतंत्र और लोकतांत्रिक मूल्यों तथा व्यवस्थाओं को सशक्त करना। विश्व के दो सबसे बड़े लोकतंत्र भारत और अमेरिका मिलकर विश्व शांति, स्थिरता, समृद्धि में महत्वपूर्ण सहयोग दे सकते हैं। मुझे विश्वास है कि इन मूल्यों के आधार पर हम दोनों देशों के लोगों की ही नहीं बल्कि पूरे विश्व की अपेक्षाओं और आकांक्षाओं को पूरा कर सकेंगे। राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन, आज की उपयोगी चर्चा के लिए मैं आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं। इस वर्ष G20 समिट के दौरान आपका भारत में स्वागत करने के लिए भारत और मैं स्वयं भी बहुत ही उत्सुक है। और जैसा राष्ट्रपति जी ने कहा, हम लोगों को मुझे जाना है बाद में कांग्रेस को एड्रेस करने के लिए, और इसलिए ज्यादा अधिक समय न लेते हुए मैं मेरी बात को विराम देता हूं। मैं फिर एक बार राष्ट्रपति का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं।
Well, in fact, Prime Minister Modi's first state visit is turning out to be the landmark moment in India-US relations. What we'll take you through is right now not only the statement that was made by Prime Minister Modi and President Biden, but in a short while from now, Prime Minister Modi is all set to once again address the US Congress. What are we to really expect? And what does this essentially mean with this transformational change that we are looking at the India-US relations? Joining us on this broadcast is Mr. Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow of the ORF, Spencer Critchley. He's a Democratic analyst joining us from Washington, D.C., Raymond Vickery, Elizabeth Brough, and Kirti Upadhyay. Let me first go across to Sushant Sareen. Sushant Sareen, for all those who've always seen India-US relations with some sort of a skepticism, turns out that with the straight talking that was done by President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, it sets the tone and perhaps that strong silent message sent across to China.
Yeah, but Shravan, it's not just about China. I think China is a very important factor in the relationship between India and the United States. There is a lot of convergence on that issue. But I think there is a much bigger agenda beyond China as well. Whether it's climate change, whether it's talking about global south, whether it's talking about new technologies, just the sheer breadth of issues that the two countries are now discussing, trying to cooperate on them, developing understandings. I think it's quite breathtaking, just the sheer scope of the relationship. If you would ask me this 20 years back, I would have said, you're living in cloud cuckoo land. But clearly, the distance that has been traveled between these two countries over the last 2 or 3 decades is quite remarkable. And the fact is that I would go along with anybody who thinks that, yes, this is one of the most consequential relationships of this century. But more importantly, I think, we are not the same people, right? We come from different civilizational backgrounds, certain different cultural ethos. And yet we seem to have a similar kind of a vision, similar kind of a worldview. We also have similar problems, many of them, right? Now, people will raise questions about human rights and a range of other issues. The same questions can be raised about the United States as well. We are not perfect democracies, far from it. But I think the intention in both the countries the intentions are right. We might have problems getting where we want to be, but I think people who are constantly carping about the small issues, they are actually dumbing down the sheer the kind of relationship that both countries are entering into. They're bringing in non-issues which really do not define the trajectory of the relationship. And I don't think they're doing, any service to their readers or their viewers by raising these issues and ignoring the more consequential aspects of the relationship. But I think, since we are both free countries, people are free to raise whatever issues, whatever peccadillos they have, and they want to raise those issues. They're free to raise them. But I don't think it stops the progress in the relationship, the growing depth in the relationship, and the growing width in the growing breadth of the relationship.
Right.
I think that is almost unstoppable now.
Well, in fact, Spencer Critchley, what we have seen in the past, various administrations in the past have had that penchant of lecturing India. Today, Biden administration seems to have understood that India is no longer what it used to be, and perhaps that is the reason why that entire straight talking that was taking place today, President Biden did not really succumb to the kind of pressure that he was facing from some of the US congressmen, and a message was essentially been sent out to those who've been lobbying for a certain section.
Yes, I think that President Biden generally shows a great deal of sophistication and maturity in the way he approaches international relations. One of the benefits of his decades of experience, not just in domestic U.S. politics, but in international politics. And I think, Americans have to acknowledge, although I think we should uphold the values that we hold dear, the values of democracy that we hold dear. At the same time, we have in the past had a tendency from time to time to lecture other countries and appear as if we feel we have the right to do that and they should listen to what we say and follow our model. And no matter how justified one might feel in offering opinions in that format, you have to acknowledge that it's just going to be counterproductive. Nobody likes to be lectured to, and nobody likes to feel like they're listening to somebody who doesn't understand the world from their perspective. So I think that America has a mixed record on this. Different administrations have better or worse records on this. From my point of view, the Trump administration was very bad in this way, in lecturing to other countries and making demands and insisting they were either with us or against us. I think President Biden is very, very different from that, and he understands that you build relationships step by step, as he said today in his remarks, and after a while, you discover you've made enormous progress.
Well, in fact, let me also bring in my colleague Abhishek Kapoor, who's joining us on this broadcast, and also Major Gaurav Varia joining us in the studios. Abhishek, just a quick comment, just going by what Prime Minister Modi had said in the previous address to the US Congress. And it does appear that he's built this entire relationship brick by brick, looking into all aspects, despite the kind of pressure that, today we face in this entire world order. There is an attempt that is now being made by Prime Minister Modi to position India as the leader of Global South.
Look, good that you mentioned about Prime Minister's role in whatever has happened in the India-US relationship over the last few years. Remember, this is Narendra Modi, who was for 10 years denied visa to be in the United States despite being an elected chief minister with absolute majority in the state of Gujarat. And the day he became Prime Minister, he forgot everything, because in the interest of the country, he has to behave like a statesman, which he has done. So the kind of increase in our defense partnership that has happened over the last 8 or 9 years, Major, correct me if I'm not wrong, that a major component of this defense partnership has really panned out in the last few years, 8-9 years of the Modi government alone. And the taking it to the next level, which is happening now, the kind of structural reforms that the Modi government did over the last few years, which made India the stabilizing force in the global economy. He's gone to the US with all that work having been done. There is a reason why, with that confidence, he took that question from Wall Street Journal reporter and said that we don't differentiate between our citizens based on any factor, including caste, creed, religion, gender, or even geography and age. So I think Prime Minister, that's the role of the Prime Minister. And then he said that this is a new chapter which is beginning. This is a new direction that India-US partnership is taking, and with new energy. And look at the words used: artificial intelligence, space, quantum computing, telecom, futuristic partnership. I think the focus is entirely on what's going to come, looking ahead, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line. I think that really gives you an idea. And also, President Biden did not mention, but Prime Minister did, that the India and United States would work on reliable, trusted global supply lines, global supply chains. So I think that really gives you an idea of what's happening, what's shaping up, and Prime Minister's contribution, as I said, first behaving like a statesman, forgetting the past, and then building each of these spaces brick by brick, because you mentioned Shravan. He has exactly done that brick by brick, the benefits of which now everyone is seeing.
Well, in fact, let's just, for all our viewers who are tuning in right now, break it down. What has really transpired over the last few hours? What are the deals that we are essentially talking about, and why exactly this entire emphasis on the technology and defense collaboration? Major Gaurav Varia, as far as the jet engines are concerned, the very license to be brought in, the transfer of technology, this entire technology of the GE, India has been asking for a very, very long time. And the very fact that this is finally fructified, it only goes on to indicate that somewhere down the line, deep down, US is very clear that they need that counter to China, and perhaps India is the best antidote.
Shravan, not many people realize that, giving jet engine technology to India, this is the holy grail of defense. Nobody hands out stuff like this. Nobody gives it, if I can put it that way. But America apparently did, and they've signed the deal with HAL, and now HAL and GE are going to manufacture it together in India. So this is one part of it. It's not just America looking at India as a counter to China. That is one piece. America knows there is no alternative but India. There is only one country in Asia that has shown the gumption and the willingness to stand up to China and militarily confront China. Japan hasn't done it. Australia hasn't done it. I mean, China has been flying planes over Japanese territory for a very long time, right? and they've flown planes, fighter aircraft over sovereign Japanese territory, but nobody's done anything about it. It's only the Indians who said, okay, we'll face off, and should there be blood, then let there be blood. That is one part of it. Another thing is Indus X, Kriti is here. I see Kriti on the screen, and this is right up Kriti's street, because she does a lot of that stuff. There is a lot of partnering between industries in India. So far, Shravan, it's been government to government.
Right.
Mostly government to government. But now there are going to be hundreds and hundreds of companies in the United States of America, and undoubtedly nobody makes weapons like the Americans. Let that be said. Nobody makes weapons like the Americans. Now they're going to partner with Indian companies, and Kriti can tell you much more than that. But, this is again something that is not being talked about so much. This Indus X initiative between the Department of Defense and the Defense Ministry of India. I think this really puts our industry on the fast track as far as American technology is concerned. Shravan.
Well, in fact, let's also bring in Kriti right now. Kriti, as Major Gaurav Arya speaks about the weapons systems of American industries, how does this really benefit the Indian companies? Because somewhere down the line, the argument that was essentially being put forth is that the United States of America essentially wants India to perhaps move away from the dependence that it has had on the Russians. Is that a one way of looking at it, or perhaps this is a long-term game plan that is put into action?
Well, thank you, Major Gaurav Arya, for that shout out. We're very proud to be one of the stakeholders in Indus X through Indus Tech Council, and even the Joint Innovation Fund that has been announced. We are amongst the 4 organizations that will be leading it. On your point on Russia, yes, that's one aspect, but that's not the main aspect. I think the reason, why this strategic and commercial convergence is happening is because today, the building blocks for this defense relationship were built. But right now, we're taking it to the next level. And why? Because it's no longer a one-way relationship. It's a two-way relationship. It's a relationship of equals. It's not just India that needs US. US needs India. If you go back to the national defense strategy that the US has put down, today the US, and I'll add to what Major Gaurav Arya said, nobody makes, weapons like the US, but nobody can also scale it like India, right? So when it comes to, things like supply chain fragility, things like rising costs, things like the dearth of STEM labor, these are areas where India can really, really pitch in. And coming on democracies, I think what we're really seeing in this new defense relationship is so characteristic of democracies. It's not top down, right? It's blessed by DOD and MOD, but it's folks like us, organizations.
I'm just sorry to interrupt you. Kriti, I'm just sorry to interrupt you. We're just getting at these latest visuals in a short while from now. Prime Minister Modi is all set to address the US Congress. In terms of the expectations, Kriti, I'll just come back to it. Let me just, bring the focus on what do we really expect from the address that he's going to make. Sushant Sareen, if I can come to you, the last address that was made by Prime Minister Modi, which essentially indicated that he wants to move ahead from the past, perhaps some of the mistakes that we've essentially made, or the burden that India has always had, and that skepticism that has always been attached to India-US relations. So it has been, as Abhishek was also been pointing out, it has been well crafted over the last several years put together, and there is a Prime Minister Modi touch to this entire relationship. What is it that you are expecting from the address that the Prime Minister is likely to make in a short while from now?
I would imagine that the address would, he would probably press all the right buttons. He would talk about stuff like democracy. He would talk about, I would not be surprised if he was to talk about what is happening between Russia and Ukraine without being very preachy or being sanctimonious about it, without trying to justify the Indian position, but except to say that, as pretty much what he said in his interventions over the last day or so. I think he will make a pitch for the global south. I imagine he is going to speak about climate change. He is so basically all the right buttons he's going to press. But I think at the very base of it, he will be looking at that big picture thing. I don't think he's going to get involved in the small nitty-gritty of things. It's going to be much more of a vision statement kind of a speech rather than, the small aspects of the relationship or for that matter, just the micro parts of things. He'll probably be a much more visionary kind of a statement he'll be making out there. I would imagine that is, if you're addressing the U.S. Congress, that is what it should be. The normal transactional kind of stuff. The U.S. Congress is not the place when you're addressing the joint session of the U.S. Congress. That's not the place where you talk about transactional stuff. That's the place where you talk about the vision stuff. And I would imagine that's what he's also going to do.
Well, in fact, Shashank, Serene, as you speak about the vision that Prime Minister Modi wants to lay out, this essentially is more about the relationship is more about the international order, the role of geopolitics, and more importantly, the way India has navigated at a time when the world has seen the biggest crisis. Let me also quickly bring in Elizabeth Bro on this entire issue. Elizabeth Bro, what is it that you are expecting from that address that Prime Minister Modi is going to make the US Congress, and keeping in mind that the mention of Russia-Ukraine war and the position that India has taken, the West for a very long time perhaps did not really understand why was India really taking this position. And as I've been reiterating, Prime Minister Modi, just before he landed in United States of America, the point that he made that India is not a neutral country, but rather a country which is on the side of peace. And that's the message that Prime Minister has been making time and again, something that the West has taken some time to understand.
Indeed, and your panelists from the private sector mentioned earlier that the difference between autocracies and democracies, and this is really the realization that has come to the fore in Western governments and indeed in the Western private sector in recent months. Xi Jinping is clearly on a path towards more autocracy, and that means in confrontation with Western governments, obviously, but it also means